Alright, good morning everyone. Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Buenos dias, maayong buntag. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh for our Muslim brothers and sisters. So welcome to our live webinar. So we are the DICT, we are the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the government's lead agency in advancing the ICT agenda of our country. And we are from the DICT Mindanao Cluster 1, which covers Zamboanga Peninsula, Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi. Your DICT MC1 is a two-time world champion at World Summit of Information Society Prizes 2020 and 2021. So once again po, welcome to our live webinar on data, privacy, and protection training. So for today, we already reached the maximum capacity of our Zoom meeting, which is 500 packs. Wow, thank you so much for joining. And by the way, for this month, the month of June, we are celebrating the National ICT Month. So for this year, our theme is Onwards Through ICT. So to start our webinar, let us open this with a prayer and to be followed by the singing of the national anthem.
The King is exalted and high. I will praise Him. He is exalted, forever exalted, and I will praise His name. He is the Lord, forever His truth shall reign. Heaven and earth rejoice in His holy name. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, telas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tulang awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagtitingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin. Lumagang araw ng walhaging pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya ng pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
All right, so once again, welcome to our live webinar session on data privacy and protection training. So joining us today, we already have 500 participants in our Zoom room and also 120 participants through Facebook Live. So we want to know po kung saan sila galing, yung ating mga participants sa Zoom room. Kindly comment where you are from and the agency that you are representing. So for you, para mabigyan namin kayo ng shout out. So we have from Pasig, from Cavite, LGU. We also have from LGU Taytay, Palawan, CSA Makati, Local Government Unit of Isabela. We have from Philippine Science High School. We have from Quezon City. We have from South Cotabato. We also have from DepEd Basilan. All right, so we are very happy to know that the pool of participants today is coming from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So we will have some few reminders during the conduct of our webinar. Yan. So, here are some few reminders po habang kinakandak natin ang ating webinar. First, keep your mic on mute at all times for our Zoom participants. Next, interact with us through the chat box or when there are online tools available. So later, when our resource speaker is going to present their presentations, so if you have questions relevant to the presentation, please use the Q&A tool in our Zoom room for us to properly address your questions po. Next, have a bottle or glass of water with you. Hydrate every now and then. So, all right. So, at this point, let us have the welcome remarks. So, the welcome remarks will be delivered by our Assistant Regional Director, Engineer Paulette V. Guevara. Ma'am Paulette, good morning.
Thank you, Raj. Good morning, everyone. Maayong buntag sa tanan, and welcome to our webinar on the data privacy and protection. June is the National ICT Month, and the DICT is the lead government agency in promoting this celebration. For this year, our theme is Onwards Through ICT. The theme focuses on digital transformation in the national economy, guided by the newly adopted CHIP framework of the World Bank to revitalize and strengthen the nations through ICT. CHIP stands for Connect, Harness, Innovate, and Protect. This live webinar, the Data Privacy and Protection, is part of the DICT Mindanao Cluster 1's commemoration of the National ICT Month. This aims to build the technical capability of the various workforce in the government agency and business enterprise by building courses that will aid in the management and implementation of various digitally governed rules and standards in securing and processing data, documentation, application, and infrastructure. I welcome all the participants that are joining us for our two-day live webinar session through via Zoom. I think Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Yes, I have seen through the chat box, full house tayo for today. I am hoping that you will learn a lot of essential information from our esteemed resource persons. I also welcome our 4 distinguished resource speakers for the National Privacy Commission, namely Mr. Jansen Isguera, Attorney Amor Venenoso, Attorney Ivy Grace Villasoto, and Attorney Vida Zora G. Bokar. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. This webinar is just one of the activities of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Mindanao Cluster 1, in line with the celebration of the National ICT Month. Hence, I would like to encourage you guys to please visit our official Facebook page, the DICT Mindanao Cluster 1, to know more of our calendar of activities for this month. Once again, welcome and good morning. Maayong buntag sa tanan. Thank you. Back to you, Raj. Thank you very much, guys.
All right. Thank you so much, Ma'am Paulette. So as what Ma'am Paulette have mentioned po, no, this webinar is part of our celebration of the National ICT Month. So for you to be updated sa mga iba't ibang activities ng DICT Mindanao Cluster 1, you may visit our official Facebook page. Kung saan posted po ang ating calendar of activities for the entire month. So this time, I think excited na rin kayo kasi it's time to meet our resource speaker. So for our session 1, our topics are the following. First, we will have the Data Privacy Act of 2012, goals, results, roles, accountability, and responsibility. Next is the Data Privacy and Security Policies, rules, and standards of policy making. So allow me to introduce our first resource person for the day. So our first resource speaker is the OIC Director of the Privacy Policy Office of the National Privacy Commission, and an independent body mandated to administer and implement the Data Privacy Act of 2012. She joined the commission in October 2016. She obtained her Bachelor of Arts, major in administration from the University of Philippines in 2004, and her Bachelor of Laws degree from the Far Eastern University in 2009. She has been in the practice of law since 2010. Prior to joining the commission, she was a director for tax services as SGV and Company, a member practice of Ernst & Young Global Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our first resource speaker for today, Attorney Ivy Grace T. Villasoto.
Good morning. Good morning po everyone. Good morning. Happy ICT month sa lahat po ng attendees natin. Thank you for inviting the National Privacy Commission in your live 2-day webinar. So, sir, I'll start na po my presentation.
Sure, ma'am. Opo.
So, I hope everyone can see my screen.
Visible na po.
Thank you. All right, so I'll start na po. So, for this morning, we have 2 sessions, I think. One would be the overview of the Data Privacy Act of 2012, some of the salient provisions. Siguro po, sana po, refresher or review of what the Data Privacy Act is, what the NPC is, who we are, sino si NPC, anong ginagawa namin, and also updates din siguro on data privacy amidst the pandemic. And then the second session, which will be handled later, would be by Attorney Vida Bokar, would deal on the privacy impact assessments. All right. So for an overview of the DPA, as we know, even before the pandemic started, a lot of our transactions slowly, we've started moving online, online platforms. Nasa-start na tayo ng ating digital transformation. But when the pandemic happened, at nandito pa rin po tayo sa midst ng pandemic, mas na-accelerate yung digital transformation, na push po tayong lahat to shift towards online platforms in doing all of our everyday work, all of our core functions. especially for the government, yung pagbibigay po ng public service, yung ating mga public functions, even for the private sector, syempre for the businesses, on how they conduct their day-to-day businesses, nag-move talaga online. And even before the pandemic, heavy users na po tayo ng social media and other online platforms. So with this, siguro mas na-increase pa po yung ganong paggamit natin ng mga platforms na ito sa internet. So with that, dapat alam po natin yung risks involved when we use online platforms. Dapat alam po natin as government agencies, as schools, nakita ko po may mga LGUs, may mga national government agencies po in attendance this morning. Dapat alam po natin yung ating mga duties and responsibilities under the DPA. And syempre po as data subjects as well, dahil tayo po yung personal data po natin ay protected under the DPA. So dapat alam din po natin yung ating mga karapatan under this law. I'll just share a short video coming from ito po ay advertisement po ata for an iPhone. Nakakatawa lang po kasi kung paano nila pinresent yung parang naging ugali na ng mga tao to like overshare or to give out information in the internet and how it looks like when you do it in the physical world. Let's watch po.
I've browsed 8 sites for divorce attorneys today.
I browsed 8 sites for divorce attorneys today.
My login for everything is Pauline@paulinefoo.com.
I love working with you.
Me too.
Red heart emoji.
Pink heart emoji.
Yellow heart emoji.
Blue heart emoji.
I hate Lee though.
Puke emoji.
Puke emoji.
I am currently reading an article titled 10 Ways to Keep Sweaty Hands from Holding You Back.
My home is in 1,000 feet.
My heart rate is currently 150, 151, 152, and back down to 150.
On March 15th at 9:16 a.m., I purchased prenatal vitamins and 4 pregnancy tests.
The number on my credit card is 0237 1221 0725 0211.
So, yun po, nakita po natin dun sa short na advert na parang ang weird po if we do that kind of sharing in the physical world na ina-announce natin yung credit card details natin and other financial data. Yung mga bagay na dapat po talaga hindi po natin siya binobroadcast sa public, hindi po natin siya pinopost sa mga social media platforms. So just a reminder na when we do that, madami po kasing pwedeng paggamitan yung mga ganong klaseng information. Minsan po yung mga mundane things lang na pwede tayong masenda ng mga advertisement, masendan po tayo ng mga targeted ads. Pero yung iba pong mas nakakatakot na epekto nun is it's possible na magkaroon po ng decisions affecting us na hindi po natin alam because nga na-scrape pala yung data natin, sobra-sobra po pala yung na-share natin online. So dapat po we are really circumspect every time if we would decide to share our personal, even sensitive personal information online. So ano po ba itong right to data privacy? Kasi even under the Data Privacy Act of 2012, hindi po siya define. Wala po talagang definition yung ano yung karapatan na ito. Pero essentially, ito po yung karapatan natin. This is the right of an individual. So mga tao, katulad po natin, to have reasonable control over how our personal data is collected, who can access our data, who can use our personal data, either po by the government or the private sector. So yun po yun, parang meron tayong reasonable control over how our personal data is being processed. So meron po tayong batas, yung Data Privacy Act of 2012 or RA 10173. This is an act protecting individual personal information in information and communication systems in the government and the private sector. Kinreate po nito ang National Privacy Commission. So dito po makikita natin medyo broad yung scope po ng batas natin. It's applicable to both the government and the private sector. In other jurisdictions po kasi hindi po yung data protection law nila in other jurisdictions, hindi po siya nag-a-apply sa government. Pero dito po sa atin, it's applicable to everyone processing personal data. So under this law, ang mga involved po would be us, the National Privacy Commission, yung mga companies, mga government agencies, and any person actually who processes personal data. As syempre po, tayo po ng mga data subjects, yung mga personal data, kung kaninong personal data po yung pinoproseso nitong mga kumpanya at mga ahensya na to. The law is applicable not only within the Philippines, meron po siyang extraterritorial application. So meaning, if there's a Filipino abroad, his or her data is being processed. So it's possible po na ma-enforce po natin ang Data Privacy Act doon sa labas. So meron pong extraterritorial application ang DPA. So sino ba si NPC? So what we are, we want to be a responsive regulator. Ito po essentially yung ginagawa namin. Rulemaking, advisory, public education. We have a compliance and monitoring function. So parang may audit function po kami. We conduct privacy sweeps and compliance checks. Siyempre po, nandyan po yung aming complaints and investigation na function. Meron po kaming dedicated division who does investigations. And of course, yung enforcement function din po ng NPC. Meron po kaming commissioner, si Commissioner Liboro, and then he has two deputy privacy commissioners, si Commissioner Leandro Aguirre, and Deputy Privacy Commissioner Leandro Aguirre, and Deputy Privacy Commissioner John Henry Naga. Ang goals po talaga namin ay itong tatlo: data privacy rights are promoted, data subject rights are protected, and our stakeholders' capacities are developed. So isa po ito sa mga capacity building activities din po ng NPC, where we engage in public education and we share, we participate in other government agencies webinars so that ma-spread out pa po yung awareness on the Data Privacy Act of 2012 and who the NPC is. So para po mas maging aware po tayong lahat na meron pong ahensya na pwede pong makatulong with respect to your data privacy concerns. So siguro po a review lang of the key terms under the law, kung ano po yung mga dapat po nating tandaan with respect to the DPA. So personal information and sensitive personal information. So kanina pa po ako nagsasabi na yung personal data natin dapat alagaan, dapat i-secure, etc. Pero ano-ano ba itong mga personal and sensitive personal information? So under the DPA, yung personal information is any information which can identify you. So ito yung mga usual natin na name, mobile number, telephone number, your address, your email address. So those are personal information because it can identify, these types of information can identify you. Pero yung sensitive po, merong particular na listahan under the DPA kung ano yung sensitive. So ito po yun, yung race, ethnic origin, even marital status is sensitive. Age is sensitive. So age, so ang variation ng age is date of birth kasi pwede mong ma-compute yung age from the date of birth. Your religion, your educational records, your health records, yung mga numbers which are unique to you. So yung mga inisyu po ng government like your tax identification number, your passport number, your SS number, GSIS number, UMID, yung pong mga yan na mga numbers issued to you by the government which is unique, which is peculiar to you. Yan po ay sensitive personal information. So bakit po ba natin din-differentiate yung personal sa sensitive personal information? Kasi pag ang involved po sa isang complaint or sa isang data privacy violation is sensitive personal information, mas mataas po yung penalties under the law. Yun po, kaya po yun yung isa po nating tatandaan na kapag sensitive personal information yung involved, the penalties are higher. And also, merong specific instances lang kung kailan pinapayagan yung pag-process ng sensitive personal information. Mamaya po in the later slides, madidiscuss po yung lawful basis for processing ng personal as well as ng sensitive personal information. So yung data subject, sino po ba ang data subject? As mentioned earlier, lahat po tayo, lahat ng natural persons ay data subjects. So tao lang po ang data subjects, natural persons. So yung mga corporations, yung mga juridical entities, hindi po sila natural persons, juridical persons po sila. So yung data nila is not protected under the DPA, but it's protected probably under some other applicable law. So ito po yung mga data subjects. So tayo pong lahat. So mga empleyado tayo, pasyente, mga estudyante, voters, as a consumer, as a subscriber, constituent, stakeholder. So any person po, any natural person can be a data subject whose personal data is being processed. And lahat po tayo ay meron din pong mga karapatan under the Data Privacy Act of 2012. So sino naman po ang Personal Information Controller or PIC, Personal Information Controller? Ito po yung either entity or natural person din po who controls the processing of our personal data. So it could be the government, it could be hospitals, it could be the banks, it could be schools. Pwede din po ito yung mga apps na dina-download natin sa phones natin, sa devices, na kahit wala po silang physical presence, wala silang brick and mortar na offices, halimbawa. Pero they collect our personal information, they process our personal information online via these apps, so they can be considered as personal information controllers as well. Kasama din po dito yung ating mga professionals. So if you have your doctors po or your lawyers or accountants or architects or engineers or dentists or kung sino man pong professionals na nagpo-process din syempre ng personal data ng mga clients nila who are individuals, they are also considered as personal information controllers na merong mga obligations under the Data Privacy Act. Sino naman po si PIP or the Personal Information Processor? Ito po yung third party kung kanino ina-outsource ng isang PIC yung pagpo-process ng personal data. So one example that I often give is yung si DFA, halimbawa po, si Department of Foreign Affairs. Siya po yung Personal Information Controller ng mga passports natin. Kasi hawak-hawak po niya yung detalye na yun, yung passport data. Pero hindi po si DFA yung nagpiprint ng actual physical passport. Ina-outsource niya po yun. Naka-outsource po siya sa isang third-party service provider. So in that case, yung third party na yun na in charge, na nakinontrata for printing out the physical passports may be considered or would be considered as the personal information processor. Si PIP ay meron din pong mga duties and responsibilities under the Data Privacy Act. Yung processing naman po, it's basically anything which you can do with personal data. So the moment po na kinolekta po natin yan hanggang ma-destroy siya, yung entire cycle na yon is considered as processing of personal data. So halimbawa po, nandyan po kasi sa definition yung storage. So even if you just store your physical paper files sa filing cabinet, that is still within the definition of processing. So, mako-consider pa rin po talaga kayo as personal information controller kahit na 20 or 30 years old or 40 or even older na po yung mga paper files na nandyan sa filing cabinet. So long as nandyan pa siya, so you're still processing that personal data, those documents containing personal data, and you still have obligations under the Data Privacy Act of 2012. Well, essentially to secure the data and to uphold data subject rights. So ito, ano ba yung mga obligations under the DPA? Ang expectation po sa lahat ng nagpo-process ng personal data would be first is to adhere to the general data privacy principles. Tatlo po yung principles na yan. Dapat transparent tayo, so may transparency, may legitimate purpose. So every time we process, dapat may legitimate purpose. And every time we process, dapat it's proportional. So let's discuss first yung transparency. How is transparency demonstrated? Yung pinaka-common, the most common way to show that you're transparent in your processing activities would be to have a privacy notice. So I checked po kay DICT, I saw yung kanilang privacy notice, or sometimes it's also called privacy policy or privacy statement. Iba-iba po yung tawag, pero essentially ito po yun, parang meron siyang notice to the public. Ito po nakita ko po yung sa Rapid Pass. So in-explain po ni DICT what data is collected, how data is collected, bakit siya kino-collect, etc. So ganun po yung privacy notice. So in-explain po natin in general terms to the public kung bakit natin ginagawa itong pagpoproseso ng personal data nila. Sometimes po yung iba, instead na naka-text version yung kanilang privacy notice, ginagawa po nilang cartoons. So ito po meron po siyang parang cartoon version. Yung iba naman po naka-video siya. So siguro po to properly, to better explain to the data subjects kung paano pinoprocess yung data nila. Kasi minsan po hindi na po nababasa, or kung masyado pong mahaba yung privacy notice, hindi po siya binabasa na ng mga data subjects natin. So to have a better engagement to our data subjects, yung iba ginagawa pong video para siguro mas maintindihan ng mga data subjects yung rationale kung bakit pinoprocess yung personal data nila. So ito, a privacy notice is a way to communicate your privacy practices to the public. External communication po siya. Iba po yung nasa loob ng mga kumpanya natin or ng mga ahensya natin. Yun naman po yung i-discuss I think tomorrow, yung po yung PMP, Privacy Management Program. Yung kasama na din po doon yung privacy manual. Ito pong privacy notice is outward looking, so external comms po siya. Is created with input from the department's processing personal information. And pwede po natin siyang i-update as often as is necessary, lalo na kung may mga changes po dun sa ating mga processing operations and procedures. So as to the privacy notice framework, ito po yung tinitingnan natin. So alam dapat natin yung process natin, ano yung ilalaman ng ating privacy notice, and ano yung form na gagamitin natin to convey the privacy notice. So as to process, so ito po yung dapat po sana nating tinitingnan. You determine ano yung ginagawa ba ng ating agency, ng ating ahensya with personal data. So how we collect, how we use it, dinidisclose ba, how we store yung retention period, etc. So determine the agency's treatment of personal data is legally compliant. So dapat alam natin yung lawful basis for processing natin. Develop an internal policy that reflects how your organization treats personal data, and use that internal policy to create the external naman, the external facing document na ipapaalam natin, na i-broadcast natin sa ating mga data subjects. So ayun, ito na nga yung mga detalye kung ano yung ilalaman ng ating privacy notice. So usually ito po yung dapat laman niya. Kaya ang haba-haba po niya ng mga the usual privacy notice na nakikita natin sa mga websites, sa mga apps. Ano yung personal data na kino-collect, bakit siya kino-collect, ano yung lawful basis for processing. So based ba yan sa consent, based ba yan sa kontrata, based ba yan sa isang batas. Ano yung scope and method of processing. Sinishare ba natin yung data at kanino. Meron bang automated access? Paano natin siya sinustore? Paano siya sinisecure? At paano siya i-dispose? So ang dami pong hinihingi ng kung ano yung dapat lamanin ng isang privacy notice. Kaya usually nga mahaba siya. Doon din dapat i-specify natin yung data subject rights and paano nila i-exercise yung rights na yon. As well as ito po yung last one is the contact details of your data protection officer. Hindi siya okay lang po na na hindi ilagay yung pangalan ni data protection officer, basta nandun po yung kung meron man siyang generic email na dpo@xyz.com.gov.ph halimbawa po ganun. Okay lang po yun na hindi po natin sabihin yung name niya. Pero okay lang din naman po kung gusto po natin ipaalam na sa ating mga data subjects kung sino yung ating data protection officer. Basta importante po merong contact details. So either email po yan or a physical address or a telephone number na pwede pong makontak yung ating data protection officer. As to form, kasi nga po may iba-iba pong itsura. So either ganun nga po, mahaba po siyang privacy notice. Pero titingnan po natin yung mga factors, yung timing, yung channel, yung control, and yung modality. Makikita po natin, usually yung privacy notice, meron po tayo nakikitang just in time, yung bigla na lang magpa-pop up na may notification sa'yo na usually sa mga apps, nakikita po natin yan na this app is accessing your camera or accessing your location. Dito po sa Zoom, napapansin po natin yung meron pong maliit na button na red na nagbi-blink-blink na recording. So it's also a notice that the meeting is being recorded. So notice po yun sa inyo. Notice sa atin na mga participants in this particular meeting or conference na recorded siya. Na meron din pong button doon na nagla-live po siya sa Facebook. So yung mga ganon, it's yung timing, yung channel, yung mode, so visual ba siya, auditory, haptic, machine readable. Ito po yung mga pwede nating tingnan na mga form on how we can present our privacy notice to our data subjects. So on legitimate purpose, so kanina po transparency yun, pero ito naman po sumunod is legitimate purpose na principle. So as mentioned, every time po na magpo-process tayo, dapat may legitimate purpose. Hindi lang dahil gusto natin mag-process, lalo na sa government. So dapat po pipili tayo ng pinaka-appropriate na lawful basis for processing. As government agencies, malamang lang po sa hindi, ang ating basis for processing would be our mandates. So usually it's based on law, it's based on a legal obligation, based on the fulfillment of your functions as a public authority. Posible din po siguro na based on contract and consent, kasi syempre we enter into contracts. Pero yung sa consent portion, minsan po nagkakaroon ng concern as to whether or not kung kukuha tayo ng consent, if really consent is the lawful basis, kasi kung government agency getting consent from a data subject, baka in the end or baka in the future magkaroon ng issue na baka sabihin na hindi siya freely given. Kasi nga kung gobyerno ka and kukuha ka ng consent sa data subject, how do you prove that the data subject really understood na nagbibigay siya ng consent? How do you prove na freely given siya? Kasi merong imbalance as to the relationship between a government agency and yung ating mga constituents or ating mga data subjects. Pero yun nga, it's a case-to-case basis, kailangan nating pumili. Dito po sa Section 12, it's processing ng personal information. So ayan po yung mga posible nating maging lawful basis for processing. Except lang po the last bullet, kasi si legitimate interest of the PIC, in other jurisdictions, usually, hindi po siya nakiklaim ng government agency as a lawful basis. This is more proper for the private sector. Kasi nga po, kung government agency ka, ang processing mo is most probably based on law or based on your mandate, based on regulation, based on an ordinance. Yung legitimate interest is parang na-equate siya sa legitimate business interest ng mga private sector PICs natin. For processing naman po ng sensitive. So ito, medyo pareho, medyo may pagkakapareho, pero meron din pong pagkakaiba. So dapat i-check po natin kung ano ba yung personal data na pinoprocess natin. Is it personal lang or is it sensitive personal information? So pipili po tayo dito sa Section 13 kapag sensitive. So nandyan pa rin po yung consent, nandyan pa rin yung processing based on law, protection of life and health ng data subject. Ito po processing by public organizations. Ito po yung mga non-stock, non-profit. Processing the data of their members. Processing for medical treatment. And yung processing for the lawful rights and interests in court proceedings and establishment or defense of legal claims. So malamang din po pag government, dun po tayo sa processing because of an existing law or regulation. Or baka dun sa establishment or defense of legal claims. Posible din pong consent, yun nga po case to case, baka consent naman talaga yung appropriate basis, pero kailangan natin siyang i-evaluate talaga if we will get consent. Ayan, yung tanong, is consent always needed? Kasi madami pong nagtatanong sa amin na nahihirapan daw po silang kumuha ng consent. Kasi baka nga po hindi consent yung ating lawful basis for processing. So, hindi po siya always consent will not always be the most appropriate basis for processing. Isa lang po siya sa pwede nating pagpilian. So, kailangan po talaga nating tingnan, lalo na sa government, kung kuha tayo ng consent, paano pag nag-object or paano pag nag-withdraw ng consent si data subject. Titingnan po natin yun kasi kung i-continue pa rin natin yung processing, so malamang sa hindi po consent yung proper basis. Kasi for consent to be valid, it should be withdrawable. It can be consent can be withdrawn at any time. So kapag po ang processing natin ay binase natin sa consent, ready po tayo dapat na pwedeng mag-withdraw ng consent ang data subject. And when that happens, hindi na po dapat natin ipo-process. Pero pag yun pala, pwede pa rin natin i-process because hindi naman pala consent yung basis. So parang mali po yung naging choice natin at the outset. So dapat po siguro at the very beginning, naging klaro tayo na hindi pala consent-based ito. Ang processing ko pala is based on a law. It's based on an ordinance. It's based on a particular issuance na kung ano man pong government agency, either sa LGUs po or sa national government agency na batas or issuance or EO or ordinance. Yun po, kailangan po natin yun i-check kung ano ba talaga yung ating lawful basis for processing. Kasi hindi lang po siya laging consent. So on the special cases, ito din po, kailangan din po natin itong i-check. Kasi under the DPA sa scope sa section 4, meron po doon sinabi sa DPA and sa implementing rules na meron daw pong some specified information which is quote-unquote outside of the scope of the law. Ito po yung sinasabi na hindi daw po nag-apply yung Data Privacy Act pero to the minimum extent necessary. So example po dito, ito pong 6 na nakalista. So those information which falls under matters of public concern. So tayo pong lahat kasama po dyan yung the fact na tayo po ay empleyado or official ng government, ng mga government agency. So yung pangalan po natin, yung designation natin, kung meron tayong official na telephone number na ibinigay sa atin, yung ating office address, salary range, yan pong mga yan ay matters of public concern. Kasama na din po dito yung processing for journalistic, artistic, and literary purpose. So in recognition po ito ng other constitutionally guaranteed rights and freedoms. So yung freedom of the press, freedom of speech. The third one would be processing for research. The fourth would be processing which is information which is necessary to carry out the functions of a public authority. So for law enforcement and regulatory purposes. So kasi we understand, syempre po pag law enforcement and regulatory agencies, essentially their processing is based on their mandate. So there's a recognition under these instances, ito necessary for banks to comply with BSP rules, personal data originally collected from residents of foreign jurisdictions. So yung number 6 applies po ito mostly dun sa ating business process outsourcing companies. So if you know naman po, pumapasok po dito sa Pilipinas yung data na galing sa ibang bansa. So kinolekta doon, pero dito sa Pilipinas pinoprocess ng ating mga BPOs. So there's a presumption under these instances, there's a presumption na lawfully na process yung personal data na yon. So ibig sabihin, essentially, hindi po nila kailangan i-prove si Section 12 or 13. Ina-assume na merong lawful basis for processing. Pero syempre, ang government agencies dito, yung mga banks, yung ating law enforcement and regulatory agencies, yung ating researchers, the media, and the BPOs, ang expectation pa rin po is that they still have to comply with other requirements under the Data Privacy Act of 2012. So syempre kailangan, pag nandito na sa Pilipinas, halimbawa yung data na pinoprocess galing sa labas, isa-secure nila yon. Kailangan yung BPOs, meron pa rin yung Data Protection Officer. So kailangan ang mga media, ang mga journal, media organizations, may DPO pa din yan. Kailangan pa rin lang mag-uphold ng data subject rights. Specifically for the media, syempre meron din po yung sinusunod ng mga journalistic ethics. Ganun din po for research. So may mga legal and may mga ethical board reviews pa rin yan. So yung mga ganon na mga requirements would still have to be complied with even if we say na quote-unquote they are outside of the scope to the minimum extent necessary. So on proportionality, ito po reminder lang kasi guilty ang mga government agencies dito kasi kaya natin talagang mag-collect. Meron tayong form, kaya natin kumbaga pilitin yung mga data subject na mag-submit ng mga personal data nila or mag-submit ng kung anong information na we think we need. Pero kailangan po talaga natin i-assess if proportional po yung mga hinihingi natin vis-a-vis yung ating purpose. So sabi po dito sa DPA, dapat adequate, relevant, suitable, necessary, and not excessive in relation to the purpose. So ganun po natin siya i-assess. Kailangan yung sakto lang yung i-collect natin. Hindi po dahil may kakayanan tayong mag-collect and kumbaga captured audience na tong mga to. Kaya sige, dahil nandyan na kayo, bigyan mo ako nito. Hindi pwede, hindi po pwedeng ganun. Kasi risky din po yun on our part na magko-collect tayo ng sobrang dami na hindi naman natin kailangan. Paano po pag magkaroon ng personal data breach? Paano po pag may nag-complain? So mauungkat po yan yung proportionality na sobra-sobra yung kinolect natin as vis-a-vis to the purpose kung bakit natin siya kinolect. So pag sobra-sobra, lalo na po kung wala na po sa mandato natin, kung labas na po sa gusto po nating mangyaring public service or dun sa public function po natin. So dapat po natin tingnan talaga tong proportionality principle. Mag-segue lang ako ng a bit dito sa proportionality vis-a-vis the app permissions. Siguro po aware kayo, madami po kaming na-receive na complaints regarding itong mga online lending apps. Ito po yung mga applications na dina-download natin sa phones natin, sa devices, tapos pwede po tayong umutang. It would appear na itong mga apps na to would ask for dangerous permissions. So ano po ba yung sinasabing dangerous permissions? Sabi po ng Android, ito kasama po dito yung mga permissions to access your camera, access your contact, your location, kung ano-ano pa po. Ito po nakalagay storage, record audio, read phone state, etc. So ayan, ganun po pala yung nangyari dito po sa mga online lending apps na naging rampant po siya even before the pandemic. So talagang thousands po yung na-receive namin na complaints with respect to these online lending applications. Ang pinakakwento is that halimbawa po nag-download kayo noon, humingi po siya ng permission. Sometimes hindi po yata naiintindihan ng mga data subjects kung para saan yung mga permissions na yon. So dahil gusto lang nilang makautang, nag-yes sila. Tapos apparently kapag hindi po kayo nakabayad, si data subject, ihaharas. Ihaharas si data subject, ihaharas din po yung contacts niya. Kasi humingi po nga ng permission at nabigyan ng access dun sa phone book, dun sa email, dun sa social media contacts, etc. So ganoon na po yung nangyari dito sa mga cases na to. So, kailangan talaga when we download apps, tingnan natin, kahit tayo maging vigilant na din po tayo, tingnan natin kung ano-ano ba yung mga apps na humihingi ng access sa camera natin, sa microphone, sa location, sa phone book, bakit sila humihingi. I-assess natin, proportional ba to? Do I give the permission? O can I already turn it off halimbawa? So tingnan po natin yung mga ganong klaseng mga settings sa ating mga devices. Ito meron po din akong another short video. Ito ay another iPhone ad na naman. Ito po yung mga nahanap ko po kasi na medyo latest on na merong data privacy implications. Ito naman po ang title yata nito is overtrack or tracking or something on kung paano po yung mga apps natin halimbawa ay biglang hindi lang siya app, it's physically sinundan na tayo. Ito po yung nakakatawa din po. Let's watch po itong video na to.
Felix?
Name?
Felix.
Date of birth?
November 5th, 1986.
Tracking current location.
Can I have a taste of your ice cream?
Here's what you spent last month.
Crumbs from your table. Can I interfere in your crisis? Can you hear those people behind
This will help with the itching.
So, yun po, nakita natin, di ba, ang weird. Ang weird na yung mga apps sa hawak, sa phones natin kasi hawak natin siya everyday. Kahit saan tayo pumunta, hawak-hawak natin siya. Hindi po natin alam kung ano-ano ba yung mga apps na binigyan natin ng permission to access our location, to access our contacts, to access our camera, etc., microphone. So, dapat, ayan nga po, you have to check your settings, control your app permissions. Pero syempre po, ang reminder din namin sa mga companies, sa government agencies, kung maggagawa po kayo ng sarili nyong mga apps. Syempre hindi po natin pwedeng iasa lang lahat ito sa ating mga data subjects. So dapat po tayo din mismo, when we develop halimbawa our own apps, kung meron po tayong binabalak na apps for public services natin, dapat privacy by design na siya. So ibig sabihin, at the very beginning ng design process, na-consider na po yung data privacy implications ng binabalak po natin na bagong system, or in this case, if we will develop a new app. So dapat it's designed na with privacy in mind. And also, dapat po yung mga default is dapat po naka-off yan. Halimbawa, naka-off yung access sa camera, sa phone settings, sa microphone, etc. Tapos si data subject yung mag-on. Yun po yung natin. It's ang regime po kasi natin is opt-in. Dapat may conscious choice, informed choice yung data subject na ginusto niya na ma-process yung kanyang personal data, sensitive personal information. Yun po. Reminder lang din po sa ating lahat na nandito, if we in the future or in the near future, kapag po baka meron po tayong binabalak na mga bagong apps and other systems, na yun po yung dapat natin is privacy by design and by default. So moving on dun sa ating ano ba yung ini-expect under the DPA. So the first one is adherence to the principles. The second one is that we uphold data subject rights. Ito po, may listahan po kung ano-ano yung mga data subject rights. We have the right to be informed, to object in certain instances. We have the right to access our personal data. We have the right to correction or rectification kung may mali. So pwede po tayong magpa-correct. We have the right to erase in certain instances din po. Siyempre, right to damages kapag na-violate yung ating mga data privacy rights. We have the right to data portability. Ito po yung pwedeng ilipat from one PIC to another PIC yung ating data. So pwede po tayo mag-request ng ganun. And we have the right, siyempre po, kung may violation, we have the right to file a complaint. We issued po an advisory last January. This is just detailing po yung ano na po yung nasa implementing rules and regulations ng data subject rights. So this gives guidance sa ating mga personal information controllers kung paano po nila mabibigyan ng mechanisms yung ating mga data subjects to exercise their rights. Guidance din po ito sa ating data subjects kung paano naman nila i-avail or paano nila ma-exercise yung mga karapatan nila under the DPA. So general principle, so we want to empower individuals to have control over the flow of their personal data, pwede po tayo mag-exercise ng rights natin. Siyempre po with due consideration of the rights and freedoms of others. Dapat po yung mechanisms for the exercise of the rights, ang reminder sa PICs and PIPs, dapat simple siya, straightforward and convenient sa ating mga data subjects. And also, kapag ganito na nakakapag-exercise ng rights yung mga data subjects, indikasyon po ito that the controllers and that the processors are adhering to the principles and that they demonstrate compliance and accountability in their personal data processing activities. So, as to the policies and procedures, so ito po, nandun din po sa advisory, ang pwede mag-exercise ng right is syempre po yung tao mismo, the data subject himself or herself, pero pwede po siyang mag-authorize ng another person. Also, the data subject rights, these are transmissible. So, ibig sabihin, kapag namatay si data subject or if a data subject is incapacitated, hindi niya kayang i-exercise yung right niya, pwede itong i-exercise ng mga lawful heirs and assigns of the data subject. Okay? Nagbigay po kami ng template for the request form, request for access, for correction, and for erasure. Pero po, template lang po ito. It could be edited. Also, reminder lang din na even if hindi gumamit ng template si data subject, so long as all the required information ay naibigay naman po sa inyo as a PIC, dapat po pagbigyan po natin yung request niya. Hindi po rason yung hindi gumamit ng template form. Okay lang po yun. Basta we can act on the request. Dapat po actionan po natin yun. Hindi po mandatory itong request form na to. Okay, pwede po natin i-verify syempre kung sino po yung nagre-request. Pwede po tayong humingi ng additional information kung siya ba talaga yung data subject na sinasabi niyang na nag-exercise ng karapatan ng data subject rights na ito. Reasonable period for complying with the requests, nilagay po namin it's 30 working days, extendable. Pero for the government, baka po kailangan mag-refer tayo dun sa ease of doing business kasi may mga specific deadlines po doon kung saan siya mag-fall, kung 3 days ba yan, 7 days, or 20 days na extendable to another period of time. Kung ano po yung applicable dito po sa pag-act natin sa data subject requests. Siyempre po, these rights are not absolute. Meron pong limitations. So, pwede po siyang malimit due to public interest, due to the protection of other fundamental rights. Ito din po, ito yung mga specific. Kapag may investigation in relation to any criminal, administrative, or tax liabilities of a data subject, and in the interest of national security, limitation pursuant to laws, rules, regulations, or order of a competent court. So, syempre po, hindi naman po pwede siguro merong ongoing investigation in relation to a criminal, admin, or tax liability ng data subject, tapos magpapa-right to erasure siya. Yung ganun po, yung po iisipin natin when we assess whether or not to grant or to limit the exercise of the rights. Kasi po kung mai-impede yung isang investigation or mahahamper siya, obviously, hindi po natin pwedeng i-grant yung data subject, yung particular data subject right on a case-to-case basis. So, ganun po natin siya titingnan kung paano po natin i-evaluate just in case meron pong data subject who wants to exercise their rights and mag-submit po ng request sa inyo. The third expectation or the third requirement, among other things, is that we implement data privacy and data protection measures. So, on data security, ang requirement po is we implement reasonable and appropriate organizational, technical, and physical security measures. So, OTP, organizational, technical, and physical security measures. Pero ano po ba yung reasonable and appropriate? So, ito po yung factors to consider. Ano ba yung pinoproseso natin na personal data? Ano yung risks ng processing? Ano yung size ng organization and complexity of operations? Ano yung current data best privacy practices? And cost of implementation. So, ito po yung mga factors to consider. Kasi po siguro, kung Nationwide po tayo na ahensya. Meron po tayong mga regional, district offices, provincial offices. Tapos madami po tayong pinoprocess na personal data. Iba po siguro yung reasonable and appropriate sa atin as compared to a small MSME na private sector entity. Yun po, yung ganun po, iba po, kailangan nating i-assess kung ano po yung reasonable and appropriate vis-a-vis this factors that we have to consider. So organizational security measures, essentially po dapat po may mga policies tayo. Policies with respect to emails, electronic signatures, filing systems kung paper-based man yan or digital systems, access control, acceptable use policy. So kung nag-issue po tayo ng mga office devices, dahil nga malamang naka-work from home, inuuwi yung mga office-issued devices, ano yung acceptable use niyan. Kung wala pong binigay na device, so nag-bring your own device po yung ating mga employees or ating mga contract of service, mga COS. So ano din po yung policies natin on that. Policies on keeping confidentiality or maintaining confidentiality. Policies on storage, retention, and disposal. So essentially, makikita po din natin ito yung parang pinaka-general guidance po dun sa aming circular. It's 16-01. Makikita po naman, accessible po siya sa aming website. Pwede po nyo i-check doon yung mga requirements specific po to government agencies. So technical security measures, nandun din po sa 1601 na dapat encrypted yung personal data, digitally processed. So it must be encrypted. Tapos ang most appropriate encryption standard is AES 256. So ito po yung minimum encryption standard. I think our data security division is also checking if yung 1601 is kailangan na ba siyang i-amend to update yung mga nakalagay po doon ng mga requirements as to organizational, technical, and physical security measures. So on passwords, passwords used to access personal data should be of sufficient strength to deter password attacks. So yun po, a password policy should be issued and enforced through a system management tool. Ito daw po yung worst passwords of 2020. Ayan, ako guilty ako dyan sa paggamit ng mga 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kasi hindi ko matandaan yung mga password ko. Pero ang sabi po kasi, wag daw po natin gamitin itong mga passwords na to dahil seconds lang nahuhulaan siya nung mga automated na systems na yung nagbo-brute force attack para hulaan yung mga passwords. So ito daw po yung pinaka-worst ng pinaka-mabilis na hulaan ng mga passwords. So gumamit po tayo ng stronger passwords, especially if we're processing personal data or if we're processing sensitive personal information. In any case, kahit hindi mo tayo nagpo-process ng personal data, even in our own devices na ginagamit natin for personal use, dapat po, wag po tayong gumamit ng ganitong klaseng passwords dahil nga madali siyang ma-hack. Madali siyang mahulaan. And another po nakalagay sa 1601, hindi po tayo pwedeng gumamit ng fax machines sa pagta-transmit ng documents containing personal data. Hindi ko pala kung may gumagamit pa po ba ng fax ngayon. Pero yun po, ito po yung requirement. Hindi po tayo pwedeng gumamit ng fax machine for transmitting documents containing personal data. Physical security measures. So physical. So kung paper files po yan, obviously, ang ano po siguro dyan, pinakamadali is itago po natin yung mga, halimbawa kung HR files yan, yung mga 201 files, itatago po natin siya sa locked cabinet. Tapos sino lang po ang may hawak ng susi. Alam po natin kung sino yung may access lang dun sa particular area na yon or sa particular filing cabinet na yon. Ganun po yung physical security measure. So we design also the office space, the workstation na parang we give privacy dun sa nagpo-process kung may sensitive personal information na pinoprocess. Also, we need to establish policies para ma-prevent yung halimbawa physical destruction. So dapat po hindi po nababaha yung mga files. Dapat po sa amin po sa PICC, tumutulo po yung mga ceiling doon. So dapat nakasecure siya na hindi siya matutuluan kapag umulan. Yung ganon, yung physical security measures na dapat po natin i-consider. Ito po nakalagay, secure the room or workstation against natural disasters, power disturbances, external access, and other similar threats as far as practicable. So yun po yung mga kailangan natin mga controls and safeguards with respect to security, physical security measures. So ito po yung expectation din ng NPC, ng DPA, is that privacy by design. Privacy is incorporated into the technology, into the systems by design and by default. So yun nga po, at the very beginning, kung pasimula pa lang po yung project nyo or program or any activity involving the processing of personal data, dapat at the very beginning, dun sa planning stage pa lang, na-consider na po natin yung privacy implications ng ating bagong system or bagong program or project. Tapos, i-endeavor po natin na talaga yung it's designed to be, ang default niya is privacy preserving po siya. So, ang default niya is naka-opt-in ang mga tao, hindi opt-out. Yun po ang dapat natin sigurong tandaan dito sa privacy by design. So yung 5 pillars of data privacy and accountability and compliance, ito po ay madidiscuss in detail. So mamaya po yung number 2, conduct a privacy impact assessment. This will be care of Attorney Vida Bohar. And then ito pong 3, 4, and 5 will be discussed I think tomorrow, in tomorrow's session. So creating your PMP, implementing your security measures, and being ready in case of a personal data breach. So yun po. I hope kayo pong lahat ay meron ng appointing a data protection officer. So hindi ko na po i-belabor itong requirement na to on having a data protection officer. You have to designate, as government agencies, we are all required to have a data protection officer. Tapos si DPO, and after you designate, required po na mag-register po tayo ng ating data processing systems with the NPC. So kasama po dun sa registration requirement would be syempre po submitting kung sino po yung the name of the DPO, the contact details, etc. So magkakaroon po kami ng, I'm not sure if may slides po ako on registration. Sige, tingnan na lang natin. So ito yung ating framework for accountability and compliance. So ito lang po ay pina-expand na version ng 5 pillars. So this is the A to Z, 1 to 10, how we can comply with the DPA. So ang unang-una po talaga dyan lagi is you have to have a data protection officer. You conduct your risk assessments, you register, you have your PMP, you have your privacy notice, etc. So hanggang being ready for a breach, and then yung being aware of the new technologies and standards sa ating privacy ecosystem. So all towards, ito po yung goal talaga natin lahat, sana. So kung nandito pa lang po tayong lahat sa 5 pillars, dyan po lang po hindi pa po tayo nakaka-move on to the next, kumbaga, sa roadmap natin. Pero some, I think nakapag-start na po dun sa certification and seals. So we have our DPOA's certification. So ito po yung may mga may level 1 and level 2 po ito for our data protection officers para po ma-certify po sila with the NPC. Yung privacy marks and seals, this is still ongoing with us. There are talks with sa accreditation board on how we can, paano po natin i-operationalize itong pag-i-issue halimbawa ng privacy marks and seals. So ongoing pa po itong endeavor na to. So I'm not quite sure kung within the year is makakapag-announce na po kami on having this privacy marks, or tinatawag po nila sa ibang jurisdictions parang trust marks, privacy marks, or privacy seals. So para po baka similar siya dun sa ginagawa ngayon with the sa physical, sa mga yung nagfa-follow ng health protocols ng mga agencies or mga organizations or mga establishments. Pero ito po is for data privacy. So yung may mga good they are practicing the best yung best privacy practices. So baka yun po yung i-issuehan ng privacy mark or privacy trust mark or kung ano man po itatawag eventually dito po sa certification na ito. The next one would be golden po natin ito. Na-achieve na natin ito si APEC Cross-Border Privacy Rules. So member na po ang Philippines sa CBPR. Last year po natin to nakuha right before the pandemic and the community quarantine started. Nakuha po natin yung approval dyan. Ang next step dyan is we're in the process of nominating an accountability agent. So yun naman po yun. I-ongoing na din po ito. As to GDPR adequacy, inaaral pa po ito on how we can apply for adequacy, for an adequacy ruling sa EU. And ang pinaka end goal po talaga is all sectors, all industries would have their own privacy codes of conduct. Kasi nga po very broad yung scope ng DPA. Hindi po namin alam yung nuances ng per sector or per industry. So ang gusto po sana namin is like the banks would have their own codes, the insurance sector would have their own, education would have their own sectoral code for privacy, the health sector, ganun po para dun po nakalagay yung mga nuances and mga details na hindi na po na i-cover or hindi na po nasaklaw ng implementing rules and regulations halimbawa. So doon po lalabas yung mga specifics on how a particular sector processes personal data at ano yung industry best practices. Doon po dapat nakalagay na sa privacy code of conduct for each specific sector. Just a few updates on data privacy in the pandemic. As we know, hanggang ngayon, meron pa rin pong calls na sinasabi na isuspend muna yung Data Privacy Act because of the pandemic response. Hindi po namin din maintindihan kung bakit ganun pa rin ang discussion 1 year, more than a year after the pandemic started. So ito po, we've issued several PHE, ang tawag po namin is Public Health Emergency Bulletins. So guidance po ito sa ating lahat. When we process personal data during this pandemic, nasa website naman po ito, yung mga bulletins namin since last year. Nandyan po may mga topics dyan on contact tracing, may topics dyan on yung work from home, on yung returning to the physical office kapag returning for skeleton workforce, yung po may mga ganong discussions. May discussions din po on online learning, may discussions on employee monitoring. So for ito po yung talagang inuulit-ulit namin simula last year that we collect only what is necessary and disclose only to the proper authority. Kasi nga yun yung madalas po namin naririnig. Hanggang ngayon, parang I'm not sure if issue ba siya sa contact tracing talaga or kung bakit meron pa rin calls to suspend some of the provisions of the Data Privacy Act for the pandemic response daw po. At hindi namin alam kung ano yung mga gusto nilang ipasuspend na provisions. So, nag-joint statement na po kami with the DOH before. I think sometime April po ito, last year pa. April or May, na kasi nga po nadadalas po noon last year yung parang ina-announce kung sino po yung positive. As in ina-announce sa social media. So sabi po namin hindi po siya proper, hindi dapat ina-announce yung kung sino yung positive, sino yung suspect, sino yung probable, etc. Kasi ano yun nga po, the DOH and the NPC stand firm against any form of unbridled public disclosure of patients' personal data that has been proven to cause a real risk of severe harm. Ito po yung nagkakaroon ng discrimination, nagkakaroon ng physical harm. If you remember yun po yung mga news before na binabato yung bahay, na sinasabuyan ng chemical, ng Sonrox yung yung tao na akala nila are positive or what, na tin-turn away dun sa mga apartments nila or sa mga nirerentahan nila na mga bahay, apartments, dorms. So ito po yung iniiwasan natin. Kaya hindi naman po kasi nakakatulong na binobroadcast natin kung sino yung positive. Hindi po siya part ng pandemic response na i-broadcast kung sino yung COVID positive. May way po tayo to contact trace without sacrificing privacy rights ng ating mga patients and ating mga stakeholders, mga suspect and probable COVID-19 cases. Hindi po yun yung proper way to address itong concerns on nahihirapan pong mag-contact trace, etc. Kasi never naman po talagang naging policy yun. Wala pong jurisdiction sa buong mundo na nag-announce ng kanilang COVID-19 positive. Wala din po kaming alam na jurisdiction sa buong mundo na nag-suspend ng data protection laws nila because of the pandemic response. So, balikan ko lang po siguro yung issue ng DTI and DOLE on keeping the workplace, yung workplace prevention and control ng COVID-19. Meron po silang pinrescribe na forms, yung employee health declaration form, saka contact tracing form. Ito po yung itsura niya. I think ito pa rin naman talaga yung ating sinusunod hanggang ngayon. This was issued sometime October po ata or September. So, yan pa rin naman yung ginagamit natin. For employee health declaration and client and visitor contact tracing form. We also issued an advisory in relation to that joint memorandum circular ng DTI DOLE. So reminding lang na to ensure fairness and lawfulness in processing, na ensure natin na yung retention period na 30 days na susunod talaga yon. A few guidance to the establishments, to workplaces on how they can better process personal data during this pandemic. So yan po yan. This was issued last October 2020. Some updates lang din po on our bulletins issued this 2021. So we have an update on best practices in online learning kasi we received po feedback from the DepEd and the DILG on online learning concerns. Kasi syempre po blended learning nga po tayo. Yung iba naka-modules, yung iba naka-synchronous, naka-asynchronous. Kung ano-ano pa pong modalities ng online learning ngayon. Because of the pandemic, wala po tayong face-to-face classes sa classrooms. So sabi po natin, kasi nagkaroon ng concern kung okay lang bang mag-open camera policy during class and during the exams. So sabi po namin, opening of cameras during synchronous learning is not prohibited. So malinaw po yun. Pwede po natin ipa-open yung camera ng mga estudyante. Ang reminder lang po namin is sabi po namin, policies or guidelines should be considered on encouraging the use of virtual backgrounds whenever possible and to avoid displaying private living spaces. Kasi syempre po yung mga learners po natin nasa bahay. So kahit gusto man po natin i-simulate kung ano yung supposedly nangyayari sa face-to-face classroom, hindi po talaga siya the same. So encourage po natin yung use ng virtual backgrounds to avoid displaying private living spaces, and we consider also equality and fairness. Kasi madalas po, the learners will experience technical difficulties. Mawawala ng internet, mabagal yung internet, masisira yung device, hindi maka-access sa platform, hindi makabukas ng camera, etc. So in those instances, we have to determine alternative ways to monitor online classes and exams in those situations. So, konting pang-unawa lang din po dun sa mga learners natin and sa mga teachers as well na nakaka-experience ng technical difficulties during synchronous online classes. Sabi din po namin, dapat i-remind natin yung mga learners natin and also the teachers na hindi pwedeng si-screenshot or nire-record or what yung ating mga synchronous classes tapos ipopost sa social media. Hindi po siya, well essentially hindi siya dapat ginagawa kasi hindi na, kumbaga lalo na kung ipopost yun sa personal social media page ng teachers halimbawa or ng students. Tapos hindi po kasi, well, it's outside of the primary purpose kung bakit tayo nag-synchronous learning at kung bakit halimbawa ni-record yun ng teacher. So probably ni-record yun para po pwedeng i-play ulit dun sa mga hindi naka-attend ng class or for record purposes na halimbawa for training purposes po ng mga teachers, pwede din po yun. Pero ibang usapan po yung pinopost sa social media. Dapat po i-enforce ng schools yung kanilang social media policies. Baka po sa official social media page ng school. Tapos kung nakakuha po tayo or nakakuha tayo ng consent sa mga students and sa parents, it's possible. Baka po yung ganong instances na pwedeng mag-post halimbawa ng certain classes. Halimbawa yung example kung paano ginagawa yung synchronous class online. Pero po ang kailangan po doon is that there's proper kung consent-based man po siya, nakakuha po tayo ng consent doon sa mga estudyante, sa teachers, sa parents na kailangan magbigay ng consent. Or at the very least po siguro at the beginning of the school year, na-inform po sila na merong ganong possible personal data processing na mangyayari. Pero kailangan natin talagang i-balance yun kung necessary ba talagang pinupost sa social media, in a social media platform, yung ganong mga synchronous classes, or if there's any other way to do kung ano po yung gusto nating ma-achieve with that posting. Ano pa yun? Yung pagsasubmit ng assignments and other requirements. We understand po kasi na yung ibang social media platform, libre siya. So kaya dun po idinadaan yung pagsasubmit ng mga assignments and other requirements. Pero ang requirement po sana namin or ang expectation is that isi-send natin diretso dun sa teacher or isi-send natin yung communication diretso dun sa student or dun sa parent. Hindi po siya dapat dun sa publicly available like sa comment section. Hindi po dun yung dapat mga submissions or yung mga reminders, halimbawa yung mga reminders na hindi pa nakabayad ng tuition or yung reminders na hindi pa nakasubmit ng assignment or yung mga pag-release ng grades. Dapat po yun, hindi siya publicly accessible. Dapat diretso po siya dun sa tamang tao na dapat makareceive ng communication na yun. So the last one would be the above recommendation should be read together with requirements on existing child protection policies and anti-bullying policies as may be necessary and appropriate. So kailangan lang po siguro nating mag-adapt, mag-shift kung kailangan po nating i-revisit yung ating existing policies naman po on child protection and anti-bullying. Kasi nga iba na yung naging situation natin, online na siya. So we're not sure if there are nagkaroon po ba ng reports ng heightened or ng increase, meron pang increased cases of bullying. We're not quite sure. So kailangan po the schools are aware of this and dapat magkaroon po ng new policies or mag-update yung mga old policies to adapt to this new synchronous blended learning online. Kasi nga, hindi pa po natin alam kung kailan po tayo mag-physical classes ulit. Another one would be yung Bulletin 18 on, ito po, yung online raffles and other games of chance. Madami po kaming na-receive na reports dito. Kasi po, syempre, madami din pong businesses, organizations, even personalities na gustong tumulong. Tapos nagpaparaffle po sila online. Ang nangyayari is that ang nire-require po nila yung mga tao para makasali, magko-comment po sa comment section, i-comment yung name, i-comment yung mobile number, address, yung iba po nagpapa-require ng selfie, tapos ipo-post po yun sa comment section which that comment section is publicly accessible. So medyo po siya, dangerous siya kasi nga it's publicly accessible, so anyone can scrape that data, can harvest that data. So si data subject na sumali, baka hindi siya aware, hindi siya fully aware na pag pinost niya yun, hindi lang siya magagamit sa raffle. May iba pa pong pwedeng makakuha nun at pwedeng gumamit ng data na yun at pwedeng magamit po yun sa masama. So sabi po namin sa mga ganitong klaseng online raffle, we understand yung need na tumulong ngayong pandemic. We understand that people are sasali talaga yan kasi syempre gusto nila makareceive ng 1,000, 2,000, assistance din yon sa kanila. Pero we must be more cautious in creating contest mechanics and consider less privacy intrusive means of collecting personal data. Sabi po namin, instead of requiring public posting ng personal data, baka pwedeng mag-like lang ng post, magko-comment ng emoji, isesend na lang as a direct message dun sa organizer. Kung gusto niya sumali, isesend na lang dun yung details niya. And other ways, kung ano man po yung iba po nating maisip na other ways that will not necessitate public access to personal data. Sabi nga namin dito, data subjects may not be fully aware of or concerned about the possible consequences of posting personal data in public platforms. So dapat tayo na din yung maging kung sa government man or sa private sector companies, we have to be more cautious in these types of personal data processing activities, kasi nga po may risk talaga dun sa mga sumasali. So sabi natin lastly that participants to these raffles and other games of chance, dapat we think twice before we share our personal data. So ayun po, the appeal of participating in such contests is undeniable, of course, but choose ones that will not put your personal data on the line. Yun din po, mahirap na po mapahamak. Yun nga po, we're already down in the dumps, tapos mapapahamak pa yung personal data natin just because of some online raffle. So we have to think twice kung sasali ba tayo and prepared ba tayo na baka, alam mo yun, magamit yung ating mobile number, makontak tayo, etc. So, yun, we have to be really circumspect with regard to this online raffles. And ito yung latest namin on the vaccination program. So very similar, naka-receive kami ng reports na ganun din po, pinapa-comment. Halimbawa po yung mga senior citizens or yung other stakeholders, kung gusto nilang mabakunahan, maka-avail ng vaccine, pinapa-comment yung name, contact details, addresses, etc. sa comment section na publicly available. So hindi po din yung tama. Merong requirement for master listing. We understand that. We have to follow that. Kung paano po tayo gagawa ng master list, kung sinong eligible na mabakunahan. Sino yung eligible maka-receive ng vaccine. Di ba? May mga levels nga po yan. Kung sino yung A1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So kailangan po nating sundin yung vaccination plan. Kailangan nating sundin yung Vaccination Program Act of 2021, RA 11525. And kung ano man po yung i-issue pa ng IATF and ng DOH, we remind all PICs, whether sa government po or sa private sector, na merong master listing activity nga. Pero hindi po dapat nako-compromise yung personal data ng mga gusto pong magpa-inoculate. Okay. Ito po yung sinabi po namin na there are existing laws, kailangan natin i-follow yun. Siguro naman, hindi po kami nakabasa ng rule na pinapa-comment na yun po ang requirement na doon idaan sa social media platform comment section. Hindi po yun yung proper way to do a master listing ng eligible na vaccinees. So hindi po dapat tayo mag-resort sa ganun kasi nga po it's a dangerous personal data processing activity and we have to avoid that. Bawal po siya. So yun nga yung preparation and submission of master list, prescribed methods and formats. So according sa kung ano man po ang sabihin ng DOH and other public authorities po nating involved in the vaccination plan. Meron din po doon nakalagay na may specific system po na sinabi, yung Vaccine Information Management System, Immunization Registry. So yun daw po yung official platform. We also mentioned here that LGUs and other controllers involved should endeavor to prepare a privacy notice which explains kung bakit ginagawa ito. Ano yung vaccination-related personal data processing activities. Okay, ito din po, mag-i-issue daw po ng vaccine cards. So on the issuance of COVID-19 vaccine cards, meron pong standard form na binigay yata ang DOH. Pero the physical form. Pero I think na printed cards issued by the health facilities or the LGUs, in line daw with the printing standards set by the DOH. Pero there is also the intention to have digital vaccine cards for which systems and applications will be developed by the DOH through the DICT. So with this, ang requirement po natin or sana po ay makonsider po yung privacy by design in the development of these digital systems for the digital vaccine cards or digital vaccine passports. Yun na po yata yung tawag ngayon. So we remind all PICs involved in the issuance of the vaccine cards, whether in paper or digital format, na hindi po siya dapat pinupost sa public platforms. Yun po yung reminder lagi. Kasi hindi ko po alam kung bakit parang naging default natin. Sige, i-post natin sa social media. Kasi siguro yun yung pinakamadaling reach or malaki yung reach natin. Kasi if we have an official social media platform, pwede po tayo mag-announce doon, etc. Okay lang po yung mga announcements. Pero yung we post even the personal data, we post health data, ibang usapan na po kasi yung ganun dahil mahirap na po yung i-justify kung bakit natin siya ginagawa through that. Kung meron naman pong less privacy intrusive means to accomplish that, hindi po tayo dapat nag-shortcut with respect to our data subjects' personal data. Okay, and finally, reasonable and appropriate safeguards. So yung usual organizational, technical, and physical security measures should be implemented dito po sa vaccine plan, vaccine deployment, issuance of the vaccine cards. I-share ko lang din po siguro ito, yung Global Privacy Assembly joint statement on the use of health data for domestic and international travel purposes. So ang Philippines po, ay member po ng GPA. This is an organization of data protection authorities worldwide. So dahil nga po governments around the world are planning na to return to full economic and social activity across borders. So magkakaroon na po ng travel yan. Palabas ng Pilipinas, papasok ng Pilipinas. So this has meant sharing health information. So ito na nga po, may mga digital passports na, may mga vaccine passports na pinag-uusapan. Ang sabi po, to build trust and confidence in the way that health data is processed, dapat data is handled securely, data demanded is not excessive, they have clear and accessible information on how their data will be used, there's a specific purpose for processing, and data will be retained for no longer than is necessary. So ito din po yung same principles natin dito sa Pilipinas that's mentioned in the joint statement on the use of health data for travel, domestic or international travel purposes. Dahil nga nasa pandemic pa rin tayo. So, yung common principles and practice, so data privacy by design and by default principles. So, dapat merong prior assessment ng privacy impact on individuals before commencing any processing system. We remember that this is still for a public health measure. So, ito po still to control or dahil we're opening up the economy, pero it's still a public health measure. So to alleviate public health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we collect only the minimum health information. The cybersecurity risk of any digital system must be fully assessed given na global nga po ito. Siyempre kung magbubukas na po ng borders at freely magta-travel na po ulit, this will be on a global scale. So the cybersecurity risk should be fully assessed. And dapat may sunset clauses. We foresee, syempre hindi forever itong collection of health data. Eventually matatapos din po ang pandemic. So dapat may kakayanan po tayong i-check or i-make sure na madi-delete itong mga personal data na kinolect for the pandemic response kapag hindi na talaga siya kailangan in the future. So I think ito meron lang din po akong short video pero parang March pa po ata ito or April on the stand of the WHO with respect to the vaccine passports. Mahabang conversation pa po ito. I think let's watch the video and see ano po yung pwede po natin pag-usapan after if we will really require or we will not require or paano po natin i-secure yung personal data that we will be collecting. Halimbawa lang po if maging requirement na nga po yung mga vaccine passports.
The Emergency Committee of WHO have made it clear in their recommendations to the Director General that at this time, at the present time, the requirement for certification of vaccination as a requirement for international travel is not justified, as vaccination is not widely enough available and is inequitably distributed throughout the world. We need vaccination policies that don't create in themselves inequity, and we need to be very, very careful that the process of certifying vaccination does not result in personal freedoms or human rights being impeded in any way that is not justified.
So yun, as mentioned, hindi pa, nung time na yun, I think March or April po yun, hindi pa siya nire-recommend ng WHO itong mga vaccine passports kasi nga hindi pa naman nadidistribute nga widely yung vaccines. Kahit dito po sa atin sa Pilipinas, wala pa po talaga yung for the entire population. So piling-pili pa lang po yung mga mabibigyan ng vaccine. So this might create more inequities, yun po yung sinabi po ng WHO. So, well, in the future, kapag nandyan na po yung supply, siguro po that's the time na we can have a more discussions po on how we can, halimbawa po, we can require, kung sakali talaga, require the vaccine passports, and other documentation in relation to being vaccinated and our other health data for purposes naman po na yun nga po maka-fully open na po ang ating economy even we're still in the midst of the pandemic. So yun, thank you po. I think kung may time naman po later, and I will also check yung mga Q&A, nakikita ko po may mga tanong po. I will try to answer within the day or within this morning. So I turn you over now po ulit to our DICT host. Thank you very much po.
Thank you so much, Attorney Ivy. So maraming salamat po for that very informative and relevant presentation. So I'm really sure that our participants po ay maraming natutunan sa inyong presentation. So before we are going to proceed po sa ating next resource speaker for the day, we are going to have a 5 minutes break po para makapag-prepare tayo sa ating next resource speaker. So 5 minutes break po, then magre-resume ang ating webinar session. Thank you.
Nine out of 10 men say that Rojan E helps boost their stamina.
Alright, so we're back pa, no? So before we proceed to our next presentation, so gusto lang namin po i-plug ang aming official YouTube channel ng DICT Mindanao Cluster 1. So we are encouraging everyone to please subscribe po sa aming official YouTube channel. So naka-comment po sa ating chat box, both sa Facebook Live and sa comment section ng Facebook Live at sa chat box ng ating Zoom room ang link ng aming official YouTube channel. And later this afternoon po at 2 p.m., we also have a virtual event which is titled as It's Coffee Time. So we will be interviewing a mayor of Liloy, and we will also be giving special prizes sa mga ating active participants later sa aming It's Coffee Time. So once again po, we are inviting everyone to please watch our It's Coffee Time mamaya at 2 p.m. live sa aming Facebook page with the ICT Mindanao Cluster 1. Alright, so now let us proceed sa ating next resource speaker for today. So our next resource speaker is the Commission and the sub-project head of the Field DPO Development Program, otherwise known as the DPO ACE Certification Program. She graduated cum laude at the University of the Philippines, Manila, with a degree in BA Political Science and took up Bachelor of Laws at San Beda University. She represented the Philippines in the ASEAN-Japan workshop on PII protection and related issues in July 2017 and served as a resource speaker on data privacy concerns in the ASEAN Digital Trade workshop held in August 2019. She is Certified Information Privacy Manager and Certified Information Privacy Professional with the International Association of Privacy Professionals, and has been designated as the policy advisor for the BPO and HMO sectors in Data Privacy Council. So let us welcome our next resource speaker for today, Attorney Vida Zora G. Bucar. Good morning, Attorney Vida.
Good morning. Ayan. Good morning Sir Raj and good morning everyone po sa lahat po ng nakikinig at nanonood ngayon sa webinar natin. So magpe-present po ako ngayon on the Privacy Impact Assessment or what we call yung PIA. So ihanapin ko lang po dito ang aking screen. Okay, so lang po. Technical difficulty ako. Ayaw niya po magpakita. Hi. Wait lang po ulit. I-restart ko lang po. Hindi siya nare-recognize eh. Ayan. So, yung sa PIA po, as na-mention po ni Director Grace kanina, this is our second pillar of compliance. So, ito po yung normally nire-recommend po namin na gawin po ng mga organizations or ng mga ayun. So, ito po yung second pillar na nire-recommend po namin na gawin po ng mga organizations po natin in order to identify their privacy risks. So, nakikita na po ba? Ayan.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, attorney.
Ayan, thank you. So, ayan, galing po to sa Data Security and Technology Standards Division po namin. So, yun. For this particular lecture, so ang agenda po natin or yung outline natin is first, bigyan po muna natin kayo ng overview ng what we call the Privacy Impact Assessment. Ano yung overall process ng PIA. And then thirdly is ano yung pwedeng structure or format na pwedeng sundan natin for PIA. And lastly, yung privacy risk management or ano yung pinaka-overall goal ng PIA, how to manage yung ma-identify natin na privacy risks. So firstly is identify mo natin or define natin what is a PIA or a privacy impact assessment. So a PIA is a process to evaluate and manage impacts on personal data privacy of a PIC or yung Personal Information Controller na tinatawag po natin or Personal Information Processor, PIC or PIP's programs, project, process, measure, system, or technology product. So minimeasure niya or tinitingnan po niya ano yung impact nung mga programs or ma-identify natin dun sa data privacy, dun sa aspect of the personal data privacy nung program, project, process, or measure na i-implement or gagawin pa lang po natin. So ang main na mini-measure po ng PIA would be what we call the privacy risk. So ang pinaka-shortest definition po ng privacy risk is the effect of uncertainty on privacy or on data privacy. And it consists of several factors. So inano po natin is may threat. Usually, privacy risks are a result of a threat exploiting a vulnerability. So threat po muna. Define natin is a threat is a potential cause of an unwanted incident which may result in harm to a system or organization. And yung ina-exploit po ng threat na yan, nung cause na yan or wanted incident is usually a vulnerability on the organization or on the PIC or PIP. So ang vulnerability naman po is defined as a weakness of an asset or group of assets that can be exploited by one or more threats. So usually diba yung mga examples po or later ipapakita naman natin, may mga malware, threat po yun, di ba? Or yung malicious software or yung mga phishing emails. Usually, threat po yan at ang ina-exploit niyan is yung vulnerability either sa software po natin, hindi natin na-update yung mga security or antivirus natin. Or kung kaya masyadong mapagtiwala yung mga empleyado po natin, yan, vulnerable po sila na mabilis po silang magtiwala, hindi po nila vine-verify kaagad-agad na kung authentic po ba yung nagpadala ng email or authentic po ba yung organization na nagsasabing nagpapadala ng email or ng text message, yun po, yun yung na-exploit nilang vulnerability. So ngayon, di ba napapansin nyo, ang dami po sa social media, yung mga usually na kumbaga na nalilin lang sa mga one-time PIN or yung authentication, yung multi-factor authentication. Yun yung mga examples ng mga risks na na-exploit po nung mga fraudsters or ng mga hackers, yung kumbaga kahinaan na ang bilis po nating magtiwala or hindi po natin vine-verify agad-agad, masyado po tayong mapagtiwala dun sa source, hindi natin napapansin na naloloko na pala tayo or hindi po pala authentic yung pinanggalingan ng message or ng email. And then, tinitignan din po nung sa privacy risks or sa privacy impact assessment, ano yung impact nung risk na na-identify natin. So, the impact is defined as the severity of the injuries that might arise if the event does occur. So, kung naprepredict natin or na-identify natin na ito yung risk na pwedeng mangyari, gaano kalala po yung mangyayari or gaano yung kalaki yung impact niya sa organization if mangyari po talaga yung risk na na-identify natin or mangyari po talaga dun sa, depende sa dami or sa tagal nung na-identify nating risk. And then lastly, apart from the impact, tinitignan din po natin yung probability or yung likelihood of the or chance nung risk na na-identify natin from happening. So hindi lang po yung gaano kalala siya, gaano kadalas po ba siya pwedeng mangyari once na ma-identify natin siya or if hindi natin proprotektahan yung project, program, or system na minemeasure natin. So in identification of privacy risks, may mga factors po tayong tinitignan or yung mga, kumbaga may mga elements na pwedeng maka-apekto or pwedeng maka-determine if effective po ba yung, if sapat po ba yung security measures natin or compliant na po ba tayo sa Data Privacy Act of 2012. So ito yung mga factors na tinitingnan po natin. Do we adhere to the data privacy principles na nakalagay po sa DPA, which are transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality? Titingnan din po natin sa privacy impact assessment kung yung information security principles po ba is now observed then as well, which are confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the personal data. And then titignan din po natin na uphold po ba yung data subjects rights na nakasaad po sa DPA. So meron po bang mga methods or meron po bang nagagawang process or procedures para ma-exercise nila yung rights nila kung sakasakaling kailanganin po nilang i-exercise yon or yon. Meron po bang hindrances or may nakikita na tayong violation sa data subjects rights po ng mga individuals. And lastly, tinitingnan din po sa privacy impact assessment, minemeasure din po ba kung meron po bang gaps or meron po bang lapses within the personal data life cycle ng isang processing system, project, program, or activity. Kasi i-define po natin yan later on or balikan lang natin yung personal data life cycle na usually every processing system undergoes. So sa data privacy principles, ayan, balikan lang natin saglit, although I think na-discuss na rin po ito ng konti kanina. Tinitignan natin sa privacy impact assessment, do we adhere to the three basic data privacy principles, which are transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality. So kung nag-uphold ba tayo, nag-adhere ba tayo sa transparency, so any information and communication relating to the processing of personal data, yan, should be easy to access and understand, and yung ginagamit po niya is clear and plain language. So kung usually, di ba, may privacy notice tayo, nakasaad po doon lahat ng kailangan nating malaman about how the PIC or PIPs process personal data. Nakalagay doon kung ano, nakasaad po ba doon kung ano yung kinokolekta nating categories of personal data, bakit po natin siya kinokolekta, gaano katagal, paano po yung method or mode of collection and mode of processing. So usually if we have privacy notices or may privacy management program na po tayo, then we adhere to the principle of transparency. And then sa legitimate purpose naman, so dapat, diba, the processing of information shall be compatible with the declared and specified purpose, so which must not be contrary to law, morals, or public policy. So dapat po meron lang, apart from ini-inform natin sila, bakit po natin pinaprocess yung information, meron po tayong karampatang legal basis or may batas or may regulation or meron po tayong valid purpose na kukuhanan kung bakit natin kailangang i-process or i-collecta yung personal information ng mga individuals or data subjects. And lastly, nag-uphold din po or nag-adhere din po tayo sa principle of proportionality, which states that the processing of information shall be adequate, relevant, suitable, necessary, and not excessive in relation to a declared and specified purpose. So as sa principle of proportionality, kung ano lang po yung kailangan nating personal information or kung ano nang kailangan po nating personal data, yun lang po yung kukuhanin natin or yun lang po yung ipaprocess natin. Kumbaga walang labis, walang kulang. And nag-a-abide po yun sa legitimate purpose or sa legal basis na nakasaad po sa privacy notice natin. So kung nag-uphold, ina-adhere naman po natin itong three basics or data privacy principles, yan, compliant po tayo sa DPA. And then sa information security principles naman po, so ayan, yung para madali pong tandaan, CIA. So confidentiality, yan, protection of information from unauthorized access. So sinisigurado po natin na kung sino lang po talaga yung dapat na authorized to process the personal information, siya lang po talaga yung makakatanggap or siya lang po yung makakaprocess, siya lang yung makakabasa nung personal information na hawak-hawak po ng PIC or PIP. Sa integrity naman po, so the goal of integrity is to keep the information accurate and consistent unless authorized po tayo yung PIC or PIP to make necessary changes or upon the request ng individual. So ito po, sinisigurado natin na yung information na hawak-hawak ng PIC or ng PIP is accurate as given by the data subject at hindi po basta-bastang mababago at hindi po mapapalitan or mababawasan ng kung sino man lang po sa PIC or PIP po natin unless authorized personnel po sila. And then lastly is the principle or the information security principle of availability na availability is maintained when all components of the information system are working properly. So usually kung availability to, let's say nasa central office yung record system and then kailangan may mag-access sa regional office or offices po natin, yung principle of availability is kung may mag-request po, let's say sa ibang opisina or sa ibang ahensya, readily available, readily accessible or available po yun in whatever means kasi kumbaga na-ensure niya na easily transmissible po yung information dun sa mga tao or organizations na kakailanganin yung personal data na to. So dapat po hindi pwedeng sabihin dahilan na ay kung nag-brown out, hindi na po natin ma-access yung information. Baka pwede naman pong either may hard copy or may ibang opisina na pwede tayong pagtawagan para ma-access, let's say, yung electronic copy. So yun yung principle of availability na hindi po natin pwedeng idahilan na wala tayong access dun sa either sa opisina or sa database po natin. Kasi dapat at all times, yung mga authorized na maka-access ng information or kung kinakailangan, dapat readily accessible yun dun sa mga magpa-process or dun sa mga kukuha ng personal information or personal data natin. And tinitingnan din po natin sa privacy impact assessment, no-observe po ba ng PIC or ng PIP yung data subjects rights na naka-enumerate po sa Data Privacy Act of 2012. Sorry. And although na-discuss na po yan briefly kanina, balikan lang po natin. Ayan, we have 8 data subjects rights under the DPA. So yan po yung firstly is the right to be informed. So second is right to access. So yan yung pwedeng malaman ni data subject ano yung personal data na hawak-hawak ni PIC or ni PIP. And if kinakailangan or if gugustuhin po ni data subject, in accordance with guidelines po ng PIC or ng PIP, pwede pong humingi si data subject ng kopya ng personal information na hawak-hawak po ng PIC or ng PIP. And then, if may mali or if may protesta po si data subject sa processing ng personal information niya, subject to guidelines din po, we can exercise the right to object. And then kung right to erasure din po, subject to certain limitations and nakasaad po yan sa DPA natin. Right to damages and right to file a complaint. So kung may mali, kung may tingin po na violate na yung data subject's rights or may mali po dun sa paano mag-process or paano kolektahin or gamitin ng PIC or ng PIP po natin yung personal data natin, we can file a complaint before the NPC.
And then kung may mali po or may outdated na yung information, we can also exercise yung right to rectify yung personal data na hawak-hawak ni PIC. So usually ito yung mga pwedeng nabago yung civil status or nabago yung address or may typographical error, kailangan lang po nating i-correct or ayusin. And then lastly is the right to data portability, which is for electronic data. Pwede pong mag-request si data subject na makakuha po siya ng kopya ng lahat ng personal information in an electronic and approved, legally approved format na pwedeng easily transmissible from one service provider to another. And then lastly, ayan, tinitignan din po natin sa personal privacy impact assessment rather, if yung personal data life cycle po ba natin is effective, efficient po ba, or may mga kulang pa po ba, or may mga lapses na kailangan nating bantayan and kailangan nating dagdagan ng security measure. So first in the data life cycle is yung collection. So collection, titignan natin dito, may lapses po ba on how we collect and ano yung sources ng pinagkukolektahan po natin or pinagkukuhanan natin ng personal data. Sa use naman po, sino yung gumagamit or saan po ba natin ginagamit yung personal information or personal data? Nakasaad po ba yan sa privacy notice natin? May legal purpose po ba in accordance with the basic data privacy principles? And sapat po ba yung kinokolekta natin or sumusobra ba tayo or nag-over-collect? And then sa storage or retention, so saan po ba natin or paano natin sinostore yung personal data or personal information? In what modes or hard copies po ba, electronic copies, and if sinostore po ba natin, may legal basis din po ba tayo, and saan po natin siya sinostore and gaano katagal? And then if may instances na nagdi-disclose po tayo or nag-share tayo, nagdi-data sharing or nagta-transfer from one agency to another, or sa ibang organizations or individuals, paano po ba yung method of disclosure or transfer? And ano po ba yung may security measures po ba tayo when we conduct the data sharing or the data transfer? Ano yung measures na pinapa-implement or ina-apply po natin to make sure na secure po yung data transfer or data sharing to other organizations or to other offices? And then finally, once na identify natin or makita natin if tapos na po ba yung project or program kung saan pinaggagamitan natin ng personal data or personal information, paano po ba natin siya dinidispose? Or dinidispose po ba natin talaga siya? Or nalalagay lang po ba siya sa storage or nire-retain lang natin siya? Hindi na po natin kumbaga napapansin or hindi na natin pinapakialaman. Naka-store na lang po siya somewhere and hindi na po natin siya nadi-delete or nadi-dispose. And if nadi-dispose man po natin, ano yung methods of disposal natin? In accordance po ba siya with existing laws and regulations? So usually, diba, pag government agencies, may National Archive of the Philippines Act na may method or may guidelines on how to dispose of personal data or personal information. And sa ibang regulatory agencies, may ibang recommended methods din sila ng retention and disposal na after a certain period, pwede nyo na pong i-dispose yung personal data nyo through the following means. So depende po yun sa sector po ninyo as well as yung governing laws and regulations ng organization po natin. And lastly, tinitignan din po natin sa privacy impact assessment kung effective po ba or meron po ba tayong controls framework or control framework. So a control framework is defined as a comprehensive enumeration of measures a PIC or a PIP has established for the protection of personal data against natural and human threats. So usually a controls framework po is our security measures. So yun yung pwedeng organizational, so yung mga guidelines, yung mga policies po natin, yung mga access controls policy or user acceptance policy natin, dyan po nakasaad din sa organizational. Technical usually would involve kung electronic or digital data natin. So yung mga yung mga firewall, mga antivirus software, and yung physical kung may office pa tayo or may physical premises po tayo, usually yung physical facilities such as CCTVs or yung mga security guards po natin or mga security personnel, yun yung those form part of our controls framework. Titignan din po natin kung effective na po ba yung existing controls framework natin for the risks na na-identify natin, or kailangan pa po ba natin siyang dagdagan or i-modify depende dun sa magiging results ng PIA po natin. So, na-identify na natin kung ano yung mini-measure or ano yung na-factor in. So, why do we need to conduct a PIA? So, first is yan, to identify, evaluate, manage, and address risks through a control framework. So, para malaman natin, kasi di ba mahirap pong protektahan or siguraduhin na protektado ang personal data na hawak-hawak natin if hindi natin alam kung ano yung mga risks na kailangan nating pagprotektahan, or kung hindi natin alam saan ba tayo mahina or saan natin kailangan ng reinforcements. So usually nalalaman po natin yan through the conduct of a DIA. And then it can also assist in preparing yan records of processing activities as well as maintaining the privacy management program. Kasi part din po ng PMP or privacy management program, which I think will be discussed po tomorrow, is yung controls framework natin or yung mga security measures natin. So syempre pwede siyang makadagdag or makatulong na mas effective po yung PMP natin if mas secure or mas effective po yung mas alam po natin ano yung mga dapat na security measures na naka-include na po or dapat isama natin sa PMP po natin. And it also facilitates compliance to the DPA by determining if may adherence po ba tayo sa basic data privacy principles. So yung TLP po yan. Effective po ba yung ating security measures? And lastly, do we have, meron po ba tayong mga procedures or meron naman tayong ini-implement na procedures to uphold data subjects' rights, which is required po under the DPA. So, kailan po ba na-mention na natin bakit kailangan po natin gumawa ng PIA? So, kailan po ba advisable na gumawa ng PIA sa organization or sa PIC or PIP po natin? So, usually we recommend, although wala naman siyang strict na, na timeline kung kailan po natin siya gagawin, mas advisable po na ito yung mga instances when we can conduct a PIA. So, pwedeng ideally, it's either a new project or program or prior na i-adopt po natin yung program na yun or yung system bago natin isalang either sa public or sa organization, gawan po muna natin ang PIA. And then, if existing naman na po or currently implemented na siya, and sako po tayo ng DPA, pwede naman din pong i-apply na natin sa existing projects, programs, or systems po natin para ma-determine lang natin, may baseline po tayo kumbaga as to where we stand in terms of compliance to the DPA as well as yung effectivity ng security measures natin. And then thirdly, kung meron pong mga pagbabago or changes in governing laws or regulations that may impact personal data processing. So pwedeng nagkaroon ng bagong batas na nadagdagan po tayo ng dapat kolektahin information or babawasan, or may additional regulatory agency or may additional guidelines in how we process the personal data. So merong usually in those instances na may changes sa processing or dun sa mode of processing, pwedeng magkaroon ng additional risks na hindi natin na-identify previously. Kaya advisable po na if there are any changes in governing laws or regulations, ma-account lang po natin na na-cover po natin lahat ng possible risks na pwedeng mangyari as a result of those particular changes na na-introduce. So, sino po ba dapat ang gumawa ng PIA within the organization? So, yun, dahil nga po if sako po tayo ng DPA, so advisable that PICs and PIPs themselves should conduct the privacy impact assessment within their organization. Pero hindi naman po kailangan lang na strictly in-house po tayo or kailangan lahat si PICs and PIPs lang po, pwede tayong humingi ng tulong from third-party service providers or pwede po siyang i-outsource. So yung may mga ibang organizations na po dyan or may mga ibang service providers that give assistance as to how you can conduct the PIA. Wala pong ni-endorse si NPC Although hindi naman po namin, kumbaga, hindi namin pinipigilan. If you want to outsource, pwede naman po yun. So long as may advisory po kami, which is advisory 17-03, make sure lang po na yung third party na i-outsource po natin, kung i-outsource natin si PIA, make sure lang po na compliant din sila with the other provisions dun sa advisory po namin on privacy impact assessment. And si DPO, as much as possible, kailangan included din po siya kasi siya yung mag-supervise or mag-monitor if overall compliant po ba siya with the advisories as well as existing guidelines. And sa stakeholder involvement, normally we recommend yung tinatawag po nating mga process owners, or yung mga mismong yung sino yung directly naghahawak ng process, program, or system na gagawan po natin ng PIA. So yun yung mga end users usually or process owners na tinatawag po natin. Sila po mismo yung gumagawa ng process steps and sila yung directly involved dun sa minimeasure privacy risks and privacy threats or impacts. So yan yung mga as much as possible tinitingnan din po natin pag sa tingnan natin when we conduct a PIA. Tapos, yung structure and format. So, ano po ba yung tingnan natin sa advisory? So, wala naman po kaming prescribed na format sa advisory 17-03. You can adopt whatever or whichever formats yung either kung mag-outsource po tayo or yung nirecommend po namin sa 17-03. Hindi naman po kami strict na kailangan ganito po yung checklist or ganito po yung mangyayari. Pero may hahanapin lang po kaming certain items. So existing methods may be used as long as, ito yung following, makikita po natin na it provides a systematic description of personal data flows and processing activities of the PIC or PIP. So tingnan po natin, meron po bang nakalagay doon yung purpose po ng processing, naka-indicate po ba doon? May personal data inventory po ba tayong nakasaad doon, which identifies the types of personal data na involved dun sa system or project or activity. Saan po natin siya kinokolekta, sources and collection procedure. And then may functional description of the process or system, which includes yung information repositories. So kung may mga, diba, sa storage, saan po ba natin kinukuha or saan tayo nakikipag-coordinate. Kung may personal data transfers or personal data sharing, sino-sino po ba yung mga pinagbibigyan natin ng personal data. And then yung mode of storage and disposal as well. Meron po ba tayong policies and guidelines? And if meron, saan po ba natin sila sinastore or dinidispose if ginagawa po natin yan? And then sino-sino yung accountable and responsible persons dun sa process or system na ginagawan po natin ng PIA. And then lastly, meron po bang existing security measures dun sa ginagawan po natin or dun sa program or process na subject to the PIA. And then, titingnan din po natin sa pag-conduct ng PIA, dapat dun sa format or dun sa structure po natin, meron tayong way or meron tayong means to identify and evaluate the risks to the rights and freedoms of the data subject. And ano yung proposal natin kung once na-identify na natin and na-evaluate na po natin, paano natin i-remedyohan kumbaga or paano natin mababawasan yung risk na na-evaluate natin dun sa processing system na yon or dun sa program or activity. So, di ba, risk identification muna, ano yung mga types of risks, gaano po ba siya kalala or gaano siya kadalas, and then thirdly, paano po ba natin mababawasan either yung impact or yung probability nung na-identify natin risk. And titignan din po namin lastly if the PIA is an inclusive process in that nasisigurado po natin na yung stakeholder involvement takes into account all available or all parties or lahat ng affected or involved dapat sa process or system na yon. So dapat yung stakeholder involvement, kung may data subjects or external facing, meron po bang mga na-invite tayong mga stakeholders from outside the organization na nag-identify ng sarili nilang privacy risks. Then sa process owners, meron po bang representative dun sa mismong process owner or dun sa mismong naghahawak or nag-implement ng system or ng project? Meron po bang representative from top management, or kung may mga rights organizations na nag-i-ensure din po ng data privacy protection, pwede rin po sila nating imbitahin. So make sure lang po na inclusive talaga siya, na lahat ng available parties and lahat ng apektado ng processing system na yon is nasama po natin in identifying and evaluating the risks ng subject, ng processing system po na yon. And then titingnan din po natin is yung may brief systems description po ba, or kung ano yung process or activity. So ang titingnan natin doon is, or ang importanteng masama po or masakop po ng systems description is an overview of the project, program, yan, process or technology. Definition po niya, so pwedeng as defined sa batas or as defined ng organization. Ano yung specific purpose, bakit po may existing project, program, or kung ipopropose pa lang po, bakit po natin pinopropose na gawin ito? Sino-sino po ba yung affected na data subjects na pagbe-benefitan po nito, or sino yung targeted nating data subjects? And then lastly, kung may information repositories po tayo, identify natin sino-sino po ba to, or saan po ba natin ilalagay or saan natin i-entrust yung information na kasama po or part ng program, project, process, or technology. And then tingnan sa scope, so pwede nating i-limit yung scope ng PIA or ng Privacy Impact Assessment. So you can include pwedeng organizational or organizational-wide na ang gagawa natin ng PIA is yung buong PIC or PIP. Or we can go as specific or as granular as one specific project, program, process, or activity. Or pwedeng per department po yung pag-conduct natin ng PIA. So dito sa scope natin gagawa ng pwedeng limitation or delimitation. Depende na po sa capability as well as resources ng PIC or PIP. So normally we recommend kung wala pa po talaga kayong nagawa or nasimulan na PIA, pwede magkaroon muna kayo ng organizational-wide na PIA. I-measure nyo po muna yung pangkalahatang compliance po natin with to the DPA. And then when you have more, pag nasanay na po or kumbaga nakuha na natin yung organizational-wide na PIA na results, then we can go more specific kasi mas gamay na natin yung process or how we conduct the PIA. Mas mati-tailor fit nyo na po to the particular process, program, or activity na may involvement ng personal data or concerning the processing of personal information. So, the personal data flows, as na-mention, di ba kanina, dapat sa systems description may data inventory or may personal data inventory po tayo. So, sa personal data inventory, dapat nakasaad po doon ano yung categories of personal information, meron po bang sensitive personal information, or may privileged information po ba tayong kinokolekta. So na-mention naman na po siya kanina, so pero refresher lang po natin. So personal information under the DPA, ayan, may 3 categories po tayo. So it refers to any information whether recorded in a material form or not. So either A, kung easily identifiable or apparent na yung identity ng individual. 2, it can be reasonably or directly ascertained by the entity holding the information, or yan, when put together with other information, would directly and certainly identify an individual. Or pag piecemeal po, diba, mas nakaka-identify tayo or mas pag pinagtagpi-tagpi po natin, may na-identify na tayo or may na-enumerate na tayong specific individual. So SPI naman po, or sensitive personal information, is yan, specifically defined din po under the DPA. So yan, kung individual's race, ethnic origin, marital status, age, color, as well as religious, philosophical, and political affiliations. And yan yung mga health records, mga educational records, genetic or sexual life, as well as yan, proceedings for any offense. So pwedeng criminal or administrative records po ng individual yan can be considered as sensitive personal information. And lastly, yung mga government issued personal number. So SSS or GSIS numbers po natin. PhilHealth, Pag-ibig, so yung HDMF numbers natin. Yung BIR, yung mga TIN po natin or taxpayers identification number, LTO or driver's license, as well as yan, mga tax returns. So, ang sensitive personal information is ito lang pong naka-identify or nakasaad lang po sa DPA. Hindi na po siya pwedeng, hindi tayo pwedeng magdagdag kung ano yung considered na sensitive personal information based sa classification natin ng documents. Kasi may iba, pwedeng considered nyo po na sensitive personal information yon in your organization, pero under the DPA, hindi po siya defined as sensitive personal information. So yan, examples na sa personal data inventory, you can include the category ng data. So kung full name, address, or educational background, identify nyo yung type, and then identify nyo yung purpose for collection or processing. So yan yung ideal na personal data inventory para malaman po natin firstly or primarily kung kailangan po ba natin gumawa ng personal privacy impact assessment rather. Kasi pag wala naman po tayo masyadong kinokollect ng personal data or personal information or sobrang minimal lang po ng kinokolekta natin, baka hindi naman po kailangan ganung kalalim or hindi ganung baka hindi naman po kailangan gawan ng privacy impact assessment if wala naman pong personal data tayong hinahawakan. And then sa personal data life cycle, so kanina na-mention natin, di ba, na yun nga, nag-identify po tayo ng lapses or gaps within the personal data life cycle. So i-identify natin sino-sino po ba yung mga individuals, organizations, or PICs or PIPs involved in the personal data life cycle from the point of collection up until disposal or destruction. And usually yan, may mga guiding questions po tayo to identify if may lapses po ba or may mga kailangan tayong ayusin in how we conduct or in how we go about our personal data life cycle sa organization. So yan, balikan lang natin. So di ba? To collection, how it is collected, sino yung gumagamit sa use, ano yung purpose po niya. Sa storage, saan po natin nilalagay, gaano katagal, and may batas po ba tayo authorizing us to retain that information. Sa sharing and transfer, meron po ba tayong ibang pinagbibigyan ng mga ahensya or mga individual, mga nagre-request po, or may mga interagency task force, or may mga joint projects po tayo with other agencies or organizations. So part ng sharing or transfer yan. And if tapos na po yung purpose for which we collected or initially processed the data, dinidispose po ba natin siya or nire-retain lang po ba natin siya, and paano po natin siya dinidispose? Kung government agency in accordance ba with National Archives of the Philippines laws, or kung private organization, meron po bang mga ibang batas or best practices sa sectors po ninyo that recommend how to dispose or to destroy personal data na hindi na po natin ginagamit or hindi na po kailangan. So sa collection, ayan, some of the guiding questions would be how is the personal data collected and from whom? So direkta po ba sa data subject or may third party po ba tayong pinagkukuhanan ng sources of information or personal data? So kung may may third party tayong pinagkukuhanan or ibang agency, indicate din po natin if saan po natin kinokolekta yon or ano yung source na yon. And then if the lawful basis po is if the lawful basis is consent. So kung may consent po sa data subject, paano po kinukuha ng ano yung method for securing the consent of the individual? Paano po nakukuha yun? Via form ba or via electronic or application form? And kung nag-refuse po ba sila, may iba pa po ba tayong basis or may iba pa po ba tayong regulation na mag-authorize sa atin to collect the data kahit magprotesta po si data subject? And ano po yung effect if mag-refuse po silang mag-provide ng consent nila? If consent lang po talaga yung basis, ano yung magiging consequences or repercussions? And then, if collection naman po is done in-house, yung method of collection, sino-sino po ba yung nagko-collect? in-house po ba siya or may kinukuha po ba tayong ibang individuals or ibang organizations to conduct the collection. So if it's in-house, sinong department, unit, or personnel? And then if outsourced, sino po ba yung PIP or sino po ba yung organization that is conducting the data collection? Sorry. Sa storage naman po, so saan po natin sinostore yung personal data? So kung physical documents or hard copies, may office premises po ba tayo? Or kung electronic data, in-house po ba siya na may physical server tayo sa mismong organization natin, sa mismong PIC or PIP po natin? Or do we hire or do we have a cloud service provider kung saan natin sinostore yung electronic data? And kung nagsustore po ba tayo yon sa cloud or sa ibang nag-hire tayo ng third-party service provider, is it being stored in other countries? May cross-border data transfer po bang nangyayari? And kung alam natin kung saan, identify natin yung countries or countries kung saan po siya nalilipat or natatransfer. And yun, similar din po kanina sa collection, identify din po natin if it is done in-house or outsourced. And identify lang po natin once malaman natin kung in-house or outsourced po siya. And then sa retention, so how long are the data retained? So meron po ba tayong benchmark kung gaano katagal? Depende sa type of forms or data na hawak-hawak po natin. And then if nagre-retain po tayo, ano yung basis for the retention period? Bakit ganun pong katagal natin siya nire-retain? And yan, similar, do we retain it in-house or outsourced? Kasi nga yun po, depende sa kung saan po natin siya nire-retain. Siyempre, kung outsourced, kailangan siguraduhin din po natin na yung PIP po na kinuha natin or in-outsource natin, nag-o-observe din po ng DPA compliance as well as nag-o-observe ng proper security measures. And then sa disclosure or sharing, so nagdi-disclose po ba tayo to other parties outside of the organization? So pwedeng individual to, pwedeng government agencies, pwedeng private organizations, pwede rin pong cross-border or ibang jurisdictions or ibang bansa, sa ibang bansa po natin dinidisclose. And if nagdi-disclose po tayo, meron po bang mga kontrata or agreements or meron po bang batas na nagmamandato sa atin na kailangan nating i-disclose to the following agencies or to the following organizations. So enumerate din po natin yan. And if nagdi-disclose po tayo sa ibang tao or sa ibang organizations outside of our agency or outside of our offices, alam po ba ng data subjects natin na nagdi-disclose po tayo or natatransfer po yung personal information or personal data nila sa iba't ibang ahensya na na-identify natin? Alam po ba nila na share yung personal information na yon? So lastly, sa disposal or destruction, so nagdi-dispose po ba tayo ng data? And if nagdi-dispose po tayo, ano yung method for the disposal process? So describe natin. And if the disposal, if nagdi-dispose po tayo, in-house po ba siya or outsourced? So again, similar din po kasi kailangan nating ma-identify if yung kung nag-outsource tayo is sufficient po ba yung security measures na ni-implement nila or if compliant po ba sila sa Data Privacy Act of 2012. So sa privacy, once na-identify na natin yung sa personal data lifecycle, one additional factor din po in analyzing or in evaluating yung mga privacy risks na ma-identify natin is to also take into account yan, analyze the implication ng mga use cases or yung mga advisory opinions or mga decisions na na-render na po ni NPC. I-take note din po natin yan. Legal requirements, hindi lang po yung sa DPA, pero kung may iba pa po tayong regulatory agencies or regulatory bodies na pinag-complyan din po natin or kumbaga sakop din po tayo ng ibang agencies na yon, take into consideration din po yung legal requirements nila. Industry requirements, kung may mga best practices po within your respective industries or sectors. Organizational requirements, kung nasa bylaws po ba ninyo or nasa charter ninyo na kailangan ganito po yung method of disposal or yung how you disclose or share personal information. And lahat po yan, iti-take into consideration natin and while making sure na yon we uphold the we adhere to data privacy principles, we uphold the data subject's rights, we implement the proper security measures, and we make sure na effective or efficient po yung lahat ng personal data life cycles associated with that particular project, process, or system. So proceed naman po tayo. So yung pinaka main goal of the PIA, which is privacy risk assessment. Management, sorry rather. So yung sa data, sa privacy impact assessment, as na-mention nga po natin is mostly we attempt to identify ano yung effects or threats dun sa privacy ng project or system po natin. And that involves yan, yung threats, vulnerabilities, and risks. And then once ma-identify natin, gaano po ba kataas or yung ranking niya or rating niya, depende sa impact and sa probability nung na-identify nating risks. Ano po ba yung suggested controls to mitigate or to minimize the risks na na-identify natin? And then ano yung current status sa organization po natin? And then syempre risk ownership ng mga process owners kasi sila naman po yung i-implement nun or sila po yung matatask to actually implement the security measure. So dapat alam po nila how to implement and in alignment po sila dun sa mga sinasuggest na security measures. And then lastly, once we get the sign off na rin po and yung go signal from the process owners or yung risk ownership, i-implement na po natin yung sinuggest natin or ni-recommend na security measures. So kanina, di ba, na-mention nga po natin na privacy risk is usually a threat exploiting a vulnerability. So sa software, yan, some of the risks na na-identify na pwedeng mag-lead to disappearance of personal information or personally identifiable information. Kung software yung vulnerability, ang threat niya, pwedeng niya may error sa updates or sa maintenance, hindi na may maintain maigi. Pwedeng ma-infect ng malware or malicious software or maling replacement ng components, yun po. So hardware, pwedeng yung use ng flash drives or na ill-suited or may virus na naka-attach na naka-embed na po ron. And then kung sensitive hardware, mali yung pag-transport or yung paggamit. Kung individuals, yan yung mga na-mention po natin kanina, phishing, social engineering, or yan, nababribe po kaagad-agad para maibigay po yung information kahit na hindi po sila authorized. Ayan, blackmail, psychological harassment, pwedeng may mental pressure. Yung risk po is yan, magkaroon ng illegitimate access or unauthorized access dun sa personal data. And then kung physical documents or paper documents, ayan, pwedeng reading, nababasa natin, di ba yung shoulder sniffing na tinatawag, kung hindi po natin monitor yung mga tao na nasa opisina natin or iniiwan lang natin basta-basta sa mga mesa natin, ayan, pwede na lang nababasa or nasi-screenshot na lang po nila. Or worse, baka kunin nila or palitan ng ibang dokumento. So in risk identification and risk evaluation, ang tinitingnan natin is once na-identify na natin ano yung possible risks or ano yung existing risks, we measure the impact, the rating or nung risk, i-rank natin siya according to yung impact and probability nung na-identify nating risk. So sa advisory namin, which is 17-03, as well as dun sa ISO standard na 29134, in which yun yung inadopt po ni NPC regarding privacy impact assessments, yung recommended na rating or ranking po niya is from 1 to 4, which is for both impact and probability. Ito naman pong rating or ranking system na to, hindi rin po siya exclusive or hindi po siya strictly ganito, limited dyan. You can actually modify the rankings or the numerical ratings. You can also modify yung types. Basta yung Important lang po is you're able to measure the impact and the probability. So pwede niyo pong baguhin ito, pero for this lecture purposes as well as dun sa ISO standard, ito po yung in-adopt po namin na mas basic para mas madali lang pong i-ranking yung risks na ma-identify natin. So for impact, we have minimal to maximum. So yung minimal is 1, yun yung pinakamababa, at yung pinakamalaki po natin is maximum na sobrang lala na po yung magiging epekto niya. And then for probability, ayan, we have yung unlikely. So yun usually sinasabi nga po na pagputi na ng uwak, posibleng hindi mangyari, or kung may mangyari, sobrang tagal po or sobrang baka hindi na po natin maabutan sa lifetime natin dahil hindi naman po ganun kataas yung likelihood niya. Up to from 1 to 4, yung 4 almost certain, very likely pwedeng mangyari siya daily, weekly, monthly, depende na po yun sa kung gaano ka effective yung security measures po natin. So, yun po. Once na ma-identify na natin or ma-rank na natin yung impact and probability, so we multiply yung makuha nating rating. So we multiply the impact times the probability, and we're able to come up with the privacy risk rating. So yan po yung for purposes of ranking or rating, we have yan. 1, very minimal, so pwedeng mababa ang probability as well as yung impact po niya. And then 2 to 4, pwedeng isa po doon medyo mataas po pero hindi pa rin ganun ka-significant yung impact or probability niya. Mas tumaas lang po siguro ng bahagya. So we define it as low risk kasi pwedeng hindi din po ganun kalala yung impact or hindi ganun kalala yung probability. Hindi pa po ganun mararamdaman ng organization or hindi masyadong malala yung impact or yung kadalasan niya mangyari. So 6 to 9, we have medium risk. So posibleng parehong medyo mataas yung impact and probability, or may isang mas bahagya mas mataas, either yung impact medyo mas malala kahit na bihira lang siyang mangyari, or mas madalas siyang mangyari pero hindi naman ganun kalaki yung impact. Either way, medium risk siya kasi yung disruption niya sa organization mas mararamdaman na po ng PIC or ng PIP. And then lastly, we have the high risk category or the rating, yun yung 12 to 16. So ito po, pwedeng pareho ng mataas ang impact and probability niya. Sorry. And pag ganito po, pwedeng, pag dahil mataas na yung parehong instances, mas malaki na po or mas malaki na yung impact, yung effects sa organization, in that in some instances, usually it can mean the life or death of an organization or an individual. Kasi nga po, sa sobrang lala na ng epekto niya, minsan nakakasira na siya ng operations or nakakasira na siya ng reputation. Posibleng makasira ng reputation ng individual or organization. So usually we recommend, once na marangguhan niyo po na yung risks na identify natin, it is highly advisable na unahin muna nating i-address yung mga high risks, and then we go lower para pag na-mitigate na po natin siya, mas hindi na po problema yung organization, or kumbaga mapigilan po natin na mag-escalate pa siya to a higher level. So how do we remediate or how do we mitigate yung mga identifiable or identified risks rather? So this is through the implementation of security measures. So yun yung security measures, are measures or controls that mitigates the risks identified dun sa assessment, and it helps preserve the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of personal information while adhering sa data privacy principles na transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality. So we have 3 types. So organizational, and it affects the overall design and effectiveness ng measures within the PIC or PIP. Sa physical, protection of your personnel, and yung physical or yung mga facilities natin within the office, yung physical assets. Technical measures naman po are refers to technological technology or technological equipment, and refers to series of measures used for authentication and protection against either theft or manipulation of data. And Usually, ang nag-i-implement po ng lahat ng ito, kaya nakita nyo 'di ba sa chart po na to or sa Venn diagram na to, ang measures na po na to, ang security measures na to would be implemented by your people or by the PIC, by the members of the PIC and the PIP. Kasi sila yung mag-i-implement as well as sila yung magmo-monitor gaano ka-effective po ba yung mga pre-post nating security measures. Na-mitigate po ba yung risks or nabawasan po ba, na natanggal po ba, or lalo bang lumala nung in-implement natin. So sila yung magiging gauge as to the effectivity and efficiency of our security measures. So sa risk management, ayan, we have 4 types of risk management or risk response strategies. Pwede pong risk avoidance or we can avoid the risk altogether. So it means halting or discontinuing a particular action or process. So usually yung iba niloloko, in denial pa po tayo. Walang risk tayong or hindi tayo maapektuhan ng risk na to. So ito po, we do not recommend we do not recommend this type of risk strategy, lalo na kung sa risk rating nyo mataas-taas po yung risk natin, kasi kung iwasan lang po natin siya, hindi natin siya nasolusyonan, ang magiging worst case pa po niyan is baka mas lumala yung mas maging impactful yung risk na na-identify natin, kasi kung iniwasan natin, hindi natin hinarap or hindi natin ginawa ng solusyon, mas lalala lang po yung sitwasyon. Unless, ang usually sa risk avoidance, unless what we call yung low risk or minimal risk lang po siya, that's the time lang po na pwede nyo sigurong ma-exercise yung risk avoidance. Pero overall, hindi po namin recommended itong strategy na to. So you can mitigate the risks. So yun yung main goal po ng PIA, is how can we possibly mitigate the risks by developing and implementing controls to reduce the impact or probability of risk. So usually with risk mitigation, kaya natin nagkakaroon ng ranking sa impact and probability, kasi with the security measures, titignan po natin or i-gauge natin ano po ba yung pwede nating mapababa. Mas kaya ba nating mapababa muna yung impact, yung gaano siya kalala mangyayari sa organization, or pwede po ba nating mapababa muna yung frequency ng pag-occur ng risk na yon. Baka pwede nating mabawasan yung instances na pwede siyang mangyari, or dun sa mga maaapektuhan na agencies or organizations or individuals. So risk transfer naman po is the third strategy. So ito naman po is not necessarily na matatanggal natin siya pag transfer natin sa ibang tao. Rather, mas nade-distribute lang po yung risk either to a third party na mas may capability or may resources to absorb the risk. So usually these are insurance companies, 'di ba, yung pag property insurance. Pag nasunugan tayo, dahil syempre hindi naman po natin hindi tayo makakaamas ng sufficient funding kaagad-agad to have a new building or to raise a new building, to build new structures. Doon pumapasok yung mga fire insurance or property insurance para tumulong makarecuperate, kumbaga, dahil na-transfer natin yung risk na pag nawala yung physical structure natin, hindi na tayo makaka-function ulit. With the risk transfer, mas napataas natin yung chances na mas makabalik po tayo to normal operations. Kung mangyari man po yung, let's say, risk na masunugan or mawala yung equipment, mga ganun po. And then lastly, is risk acceptance. So ito po yung the strategy simply accepts the risk as is, and kumbaga hindi na natin masyadong mapipigilan or mababawasan yung impacts niya. Usually, we recommend this if you have minimal or yung tinatawag nating acceptable risks or residual risks na po, na even after all the security measures, kasi 'di ba hindi naman po natin mapipigilan talagang mabawasan or malimitahan lahat ng risks, may matitira pa rin po. Pero dahil kung effective naman po yung security measures natin, yung matitira na lang po na konting risk, kumbaga, kaya nang ma-absorb ng PIC or ng PIP. So pwedeng low impact siya or low probability to the point na pwede na siyang ma-accept ng organization dahil hindi na ganun ka-significant yung pwedeng maging epekto niya sa PIC or PIP. So yan, overall, once you conduct your privacy impact assessment, yan, ideally, parang sa sign up or sa PIA sheet po natin, ito po yung dapat na makita natin as much as possible, ma-identify diba yung threat, ano yung vulnerability na yon, and ano yung risk na resulting from the identified threats and vulnerabilities, gaano kalaki yung impact, yung probability niya, and then pag minultiply, ano yung rating niya, and then once we get the rating, ano yung controls or suggested security measures para ma-implement siya. And then once we recommend the proper controls or security measures, may approval po ba from the top management or from the head of agency? Sino yung mag-i-implement nun, if approved or if not, kung may ibang recommendation, and target date kung kailan siya makukumpleto or kailan siya ma-implement or mapoprocure. So ito yung sample format lang din po. I'm not sure po kung meron po to sa website namin, pero you can check out it. For more resources, you can check out our privacy toolkit sa website po namin, privacy.gov.ph. Meron po doon sa I think sa resources po na you can download a copy of the privacy toolkit po namin para mas may guide po kayo as to how you can conduct your privacy impact assessments in your respective organizations. So yan, once na nakuha po natin, di ba yan yung parang kumbaga cheat sheet or pinaka-summary na po natin, we get, once we present that to the management or sa head of agency, we get their sign-off for the submission and approval. And once na makuha na po natin yung sign-off na yan, then that's the time we implement. So ayan, so for more guidance, ayan, you can check out our NPC Advisory 2017-03. So yan yung guidelines on privacy impact assessment, as well as yung na-mention ko nga po, yung basis po namin for the adoption of the PIA na method or structure is yung ISO 29134-2017. So yan po yung may guidelines for privacy impact assessment. Meron pong copy niyan. I think you can purchase a copy sa DTI BPS catalog. So as a PNS. And so that wraps up my talk for the privacy impact assessment. And yan, kung may questions po tayo, I think we still have some time. And tingnan ko rin po yung sa Q&A para ma-entertain na po. Thank you. And yeah, back na po tayo sa DICT, Sir Raj, for the question and answer na po or kung may ibang guidelines pa. Thank you po.
Sure. Yes po. All right, thank you so much, Atty. Zora, for that very informative presentation po. No? So, meron po tayong Q&A for this, the next part ng ating webinar. Pero for the meantime, allow me po to address some questions and queries ng mga participants regarding sa certificates and attendance. So for the attendance po, for those participants attending via Facebook Live, we just need to fill out the registration form po. Naka-pin ang comment dun sa ating FB Live. While for the Zoom participants naman, you don't need to fill up any registration form na po sa ating attendance because may automatic generated attendance na si Zoom. So, hindi na po kailangan mag-fill out ng any attendance form. So, I hope that is clear. And yes po, meron kaming certificate of participation na ibibigay sa webinar na ito. So, once you have accomplished our evaluation form, which is tomorrow, bibigay namin ang aming evaluation form. So once you have accomplished that, expect na makaka-receive kayo ng certificate of participation for this webinar. So give us 1 to 2 weeks to process for your e-certificates for this webinar. All right, so I think ready na we were just waiting po na ma-share ang ating screen para sa ating question and answer. So most of the questions were already answered po by Attorney Ivy po, no? So we're very thankful kasi nasagot niya yung mga tanong sa ating mga Q&A. So pero we will still flash some of the questions po sa ating screen para naman malaman ng ibang participants yung mga ibang katanungan. So here's our first question po. Would like to ask po, how do we recognize or measure the data collected is not excessive for the purpose intended? Are there criteria, standards, checklists to determine or measure as such? So, who will answer po?
So yun, Raj, good morning again everyone.
Morning.
So, yung pag-determine kasi nung proportionality, kung excessive ba yung kino-collect natin, etc. Internally natin siya dapat gawin. Yung katulad nung ni-lecture kanina ni Attorney Vida, yung sa privacy impact assessment, doon natin malalaman kung ano ba yung kino-collecta natin vis-a-vis yung purpose natin, vis-a-vis yung risks nito sa data subjects natin. So internally, dapat may determination tayo kung proportional pa ba siya. The NPC, kapag may nag-complain na sa amin or kapag mag-conduct kami ng compliance check or magkaroon kami ng internal investigation, pwede din kaming mag-make ng determination kung hindi proportional yung processing or yung collection or yun nga, processing of personal data.
Okay, next question po. Thank you so much, Attorney Ivy. Next question po. Required ba na certified ang DPO? Meron ba na recognize ang NPC ng certification body?
Ayan, ako na lang po sasagot niya. So, ngayon po, hindi naman required na ma-certify po yung DPOs, but we do recommend na mag-certify po kayo para at least, kumbaga, dagdag po yun sa credibility nyo as a DPO and to make sure lang din po na talagang competent or na-assess na po yung capabilities nyo as a DPO. We are currently undergoing yung may accreditation din pong ginagawa pa lang po si PhilDPO or si NPC, accreditation of external training institutions. So yun po, expect within the year na maglalabas po kami ng para accredited training institutions or bodies, pero hindi po siya accredited na institutions na organizations. More of yung training niya for what we call yung the DPOA's program. So I think some baka yung ibang participants po nakapag-undergo na ng DPOA's sa amin dati. So yun, mag-accredit na po kami ng iba pang institutions that can also implement or that can also conduct DPOA's programs apart from NPC para mas makatulong po nationwide. So abang-abangan niyo lang po sa website natin. So yun lang po.
Right.
Thank you.
So malinaw po. Thank you so much, Attorney Vida. So I think we still have another question. Another question po. Good day. Just want to ask if sending screenshots of private messages like chats in FB, Viber, and other apps is possibly violation against Data Privacy Act. Thank you.
So meron na kami dyang advisory opinion. Kasi di ba pag nag-screenshot tayo ng conversations, minsan yung conversation na lang. So minsan hindi nakasama yung name kung sino yung nag-uusap, etc. So yung mga ganong instances, titingnan natin personal data pa ba siya kasi may na-identify ba tayong tao. Diniscuss din namin dun sa opinion na ano pa nga ba yung so yung gano'n, kailangan siyang case-to-case talaga siya i-determine. I sent din yung link ng aming opinion dun sa mga nagtanong kasi parang 2 or 3 ata yung ganyan yung tanong. So mukhang common concern siya. So dun po sa guidance namin sa opinion, dun po natin makikita yung pinaka-recent na po namin na opinion on that concern. Thank you.
Alright, so thank you po, Attorney Ivy. So meron pa po tayong katanungan. Next, are there any provisions po with regards to usage of e-signatures in terms of privacy?
DICT? Yung e-signatures actually, yung in-avail namin actually is yung PNPKI ng DICT. So, pero any provisions with regard to usage of e-signatures, ang ginawa namin sa NPC, tama ba ito ni Vida, we had a specific parang policy using e-signatures ng DICT. So ganun yung ginawa namin na we adopted yung PNPKI, tapos dun sa mga hindi pa maka-avail, parang ni-recognize namin yung gamit ng SGD. Pero for limited purposes, I think ang talagang pinupush namin is lahat magkaroon ng PNPKI na digital signature. So baka ganun din po sa mga ahensya nyo. I-try po natin i-avail kasi libre. Libre po ang e-signature. Libre po namin siya na-avail. I think libre naman po for everyone. To confirm na lang po from the DICT.
Yes po, libre po yung pag-avail ng PNPKI po. So if you are interested po, siguro mag-communicate with your cluster po ng DICT na under kayo. So yun po. So we still have a question po. Next. Regarding policies and procedures, is it enough to have a data privacy manual or should we make separate policies?
Dito po, ideally, meron tayo nung manual talaga on data privacy. Kasi we understand, madami na pong existing policies ngayon na baka meron na kayong policy sa CCTV, may policy na kayo sa emails, may policy na kayo sa bring your own devices. Tapos siguro pag ipon-iponin nyo lang po yun or in your privacy manual, i-make reference nyo yung existing, kahit 5 years ago na policy na po yan, kung yung pa rin po yung sinusunod natin and updated naman siya or ano, pwede pong ganon. Pero ideally, meron po tayong isang general data privacy manual and I think tomorrow madidiscuss yung PMP and making the manual ata. So yun po. So okay lang po yung separate policies tapos kung data privacy related siya, data protection, data security related, para mag-make reference na lang po siguro tayo dun sa ating general manual.
Alright. So thank you po. Here's another question po. How does Freedom of Information affect Data Privacy Act?
Yan, kasi both rights are constitutionally guaranteed rights. So pareho po yung importante. Yan nga po yung laging nagiging tanong, conflict ba yung dalawang laws na yan? Ano yung mas matimbang, etc. Ang ano po namin dyan, kailangan talaga natin siyang i-harmonize. Kasi minsan yung mga FOI requests naman, baka hindi naman siya data, baka hindi siya on personal data. So labas na po ang data privacy doon. Pero kung ang FOI request would pertain to personal data, so either personal data ng officials, ng employees, personal data ng mga clients natin, ng stakeholders, doon na po papasok yung pag-evaluate natin ng FOI request. So it's possible naman po kasi na pag nag-may FOI request as personal data siya, i-evaluate natin, tingnan natin kung yung buong dokumento ba i-release natin or pwede tayo mag-redact or pwede tayo mag-send out ng hindi yung mismong document, baka it's a summary. Ganun po natin siya i-evaluate. So dapat po nag-uusap po yung ating FOI decision maker as well as yung ating data protection officer para both constitutionally guaranteed rights are yung kumbaga pareho silang nabibigyan ng tamang balanse at naha-harmonize yung ating mga karapatan na ito.
Ayun. Here's another question po. Personally identifiable information pa rin ba ang mga sensitive personal information kapag hindi ito individual? Let's say, part ng survey ng gender, aggregated data, o isang report na redacted or deleted yung personal information ng person. Pero natira lang yung race, ethnic, marital status, religion, age, and gender.
So yung kung totoong aggregated data na siya, like truly anonymized na siya, na wala nang ibang PIC, walang ahensya, walang company na makakapag-identify dun sa particular na survey respondent, ayun, hindi na siya personal information, hindi na siya personal data. Pero katulad nito, kung naka-redact lang, so ibig sabihin meron pa ring race, ethnic origin, age, religion. So it's possible pa din kasi na ma-connect yan at ma-determine natin kung sino yung tao na yan. So in this case, hindi siya anonymized, pseudonymized data lang siya. So somewhere out there, meron pa ring ahensya dyan or may company pa din na who can identify that particular survey respondent or participant. Pag pseudonymized data, applicable pa din ang Data Privacy Act. Kailangan pa rin natin mag-comply dun sa mga requirements under the law.
So here's the last question po. Last question. Good morning. Required po ba ang data sharing agreement sa dalawang agency kapag mag-submit ng list of employees na eligible sa performance-based bonus. The list shows the name and the salary grade of the employee.
Oh, congratulations naman doon sa mga ka-avail ng PBB. Hindi na po required yung data sharing agreement. Kasi yung PBB, kanino ba natin sinasubmit yan? Sa DBM ba? CSC?
AO25.
AO25 group na yon. So, di ba meron tayong mga ganong requirements? So, yung ganong submissions ng mga reportorial requirements, yung mga usual naman na baka monthly, quarterly, or annually natin sinasubmit sa other oversight agencies, hindi na natin need ng separate na DSA. Ang nag-govern na doon is yung existing rules and regulations covering yung granting of the PBB. No need na po ng separate na data sharing agreement.
So it seems na may pahabol pa pong question, attorney. So meron pa tayong last. So ito po. In a data sharing between two PICs whose data sharing agreement document should prevail in the event of disagreements, conflicts in the respective clause or provisions. Tapos meron siyang pangalawang tanong, for the data sharing or data processing agreement, can the engagement proceed if one party is not data privacy compliant? Is it enough grounds for the engagement not to proceed?
Yung sa number 1, data sharing between two PICs. So, if there are two personal information controllers, si agency A, si agency B, tapos nag-enter sila sa isang data sharing agreement, so yun na po yung mag-govern dun sa relationship nila, sa sharing arrangement nila. So hindi ko po maano kung ano pa yung may hiwalay po ba silang data sharing agreement pa that will prevail in case of disagreement. So yun po, kasi ang understanding ko, may dalawang PIC, they entered into a DSA. So yung provisions na po ng DSA na yun would govern their arrangement. For number 2, for data sharing, data processing, can the engagement proceed if one party is not data privacy compliant? Is it enough grounds for the engagement not to proceed? May mga nakita po kaming mga DSAs na nakalagay po talaga doon na parang yung obligation ng parties. So nakaspecify doon na party A shall, tas ganito. Nandun yung 5 pillars usually. Yun po, baka may mga ganun po kaming agreements na nakikita nilalagay nila yung 5 pillars na dapat may DPO, dapat nag-conduct ng privacy impact assessment, etc. So, minsan po, baka gano'n na sa terms na po nung DSA mismo, kapag hindi siya ginawa ng other party or one party, baka yun po baka po dun po siya papasok sa, minsan po may terms and conditions din po on, ano nga tawag sa contract law na mare-rescind yung contract because of violation or breach of the agreements. Depende po dun sa sa agreement po ng mga parties to the DSA. Pero syempre ideally both or all of the parties involved would be complying with the Data Privacy Act provisions.
Alright, so I think yun na po yung mga katanungan ko, no? So thank you very much once again po. Maraming salamat Attorney Ivy, Attorney Vida. So ito na lang po. If ever may mga other data privacy concerns and issue ang ating mga netizens po. Hello po. Ayan. So, ang ating mga netizens. So, how can they reach po the National Privacy Commission po?
Yeah. I think na-mention I think na-mention ko rin po sa may nasagot din ako dyan. You can check out if may violation or concerns po. May complaints assisted form po kami sa website. So yun yung privacy.gov.ph. And meron din po, if you have concerns lang po or gusto nyo lang i-report, meron naman po kaming email, info@privacy.gov.ph para ma-notify lang po si NPC. Ang magre-receive po niyan is our Public Information and Assistance Division. So sila naman po yung nagpa-farm out na depende kung violation na po siya or concern or query, dun nyo po pwedeng ipadala or check out nyo na lang po dun sa website namin para kung may gusto kayong i-report or may violation po kayong gustong i-complain. Yun po.
Okay, thank you po. So I think meron din po kayong ano po, di ba? Official Facebook page, ang National Privacy Commission. So para maging updated po sila sa mga press release at sa mga different events or activities ng National Privacy Commission, you may like and follow the official Facebook page of the National Privacy Commission po. Ayan. So thank you very much po once again, Attorney Ivy, Attorney Vida. So now it's time po to award Certificate of Recognition para sa ating magagaling na resource speakers for today. So we are going to flash po the Certificates of Recognition. Ayan. So allow me first to read the citation. Republic of the Philippines, Department of Information and Communications Technology, Certificate of Appreciation is hereby presented to Attorney Ivy Grace P. Villasoto for sharing her insights and expertise as a resource person during the Data Privacy and Protection Training with the topics Data Privacy Act of 2012, Goals, Roles, Accountability, and Responsibility, Data Privacy and Security Policies, Roles, and Standards of Policymaking on June 1, 2021 via Zoom video communication. Given this first day of June 2021, signed by our Regional Director, Maria Teresa M. Campa, DICT Mindanao Cluster 1. Thank you so much po, Attorney Ivy. Next po, another certificate of appreciation po is hereby presented to Attorney Vida Zora Bukhar for sharing her insights and expertise as a source person during the Data Privacy and Protection Training. The topic, Data Privacy Impact Assessment, Methodology, and Risk Identification, Analysis, Evaluation, and Remediation. Given this on June 1, 2021 via Zoom video communications. Given this first, signed by our Regional Director, Maria Teresa M. Camba, DICT Mindanao, Cluster 1. So thank you so much po. And this point po, we will now have the photo opportunity. So we also encourage the DICT officials who are here with us today, our Assistant Regional Director, Ma'am Colette, and other DICT officials, our ILCDB focal, Sir Rod. You may please you may turn on po your cameras para sa ating photo op.
Okay, medyo nag-freeze. Hello, good morning po. Medyo nag-freeze po yung ating host, si Raj. So I'll take this screenshot. Ma'am Paulette is not available. So tayo na lang po. So if you're ready, Ma'am Vida, Attorney Vida, Attorney Ivy. Ayan, si Ma'am Paulette. Ma'am, good morning. Yan, sali po kayo, ma'am. Quick photo up lang po muna tayo. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Smile po. Smile po. Ayan. So, okay na po. Maraming salamat po, Attorney Ivy and Attorney Vida. So, sige, isasali po natin yung mga yan, from DICT. Yan. Colleagues from DICT. Sige po, you can turn on your cams again, yung mga provincial officers and colleagues po natin. Ayan. While waiting for our host to rejoin. Yan. So, meron pa ba? Okay. Smile lang po. 3, 2, 1. Smile po. Last one. Next page po tayo. Next group. Yan. So, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much. So, okay na po. So, while waiting po for our host to rejoin, let's proceed na lang po muna sa ating poll for a Mentimeter poll po, no? For a while. Ayan. Ang pangit ng bangs ko. Ayan, so I'll be flashing a link po for our Mentimeter. So please do join and answer our poll questions for a while po. So, ito, yes. So please proceed po to www.menti.com and key in this Menti code 24112791, or you can simply scan this QR code and you'll be redirected directly to our poll or survey. So we'd like to ask for your takeaways for this session. Then, ito po. We'll also share this link sa chat box para click nyo na lang and then you'll be redirected automatically. So yan, let's wait for them to join. Then we'll be checking for your responses in a few minutes. Yan po. You may simply click on the link provided sa ating chat box to join our Mentimeter. So I think our host is back, Raj. So let's proceed to our Menti, Raj.
Okay. So I'm back po, no? So, sorry for the technical problem. So, yun. So we're waiting for your answers po sa ating Mentimeter. So please do participate po.
Ayan.
Ayan. So, dito na yung mga sagot niya. Pumasok na po. What are the most important lessons you have gained from this webinar? So first, meron tayong conduct of privacy impact assessment, privacy and data security, the basic of Data Privacy Act of 2012, new trends in privacy, how personal data life cycle works, privacy risk assessment, meron tayong data protection and privacy impact assessment. So we also have privacy risk management, data privacy law, the importance of Data Privacy Act and its provision, learn more on data privacy that I can apply in my current company. Knowing our rights to data privacy. And next, we also have the risk factors of distributing the information. So sub-functions of DPO and classification of information. Ayan. So thank you so much po for your answers. No, we are happy because our participants definitely learned a lot from our resource speakers po. So, yan.
Okay na.
All right. So once again po, no, we are encouraging everyone to please subscribe to our official YouTube channel, the DICT Mindanao Cluster 1. So In our channel po, you can see the uploaded po dun yung ibang videos and some of the travels of DICT Mindanao Cluster 1 to geographically displaced areas po. Saan nag-provide kami ng internet connectivity and computer package through Tech4Ed project. So, and again, we are inviting everyone to join us po this afternoon because we have our first episode of It's Coffee Time, a live talk show featuring stories of people touched by ICT. So mamaya po yan, it will be streamed via FB Live. So we will be also giving prizes sa mga active participants, sa mga active viewers during the It's Coffee Time. So for today's episode po, we will be interviewing the Mayor of Liloy, Zamboanga del Norte. So siya po ang guest namin. So it is every Wednesday po yung aming It's Coffee Time talk show sa aming official Facebook page, which is the DICT Mindanao Cluster 1. All right. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today. And we still have our second session tomorrow. So I hope you will still join us tomorrow. And you can watch our webinar replays on our official Facebook page po. So since naka-broadcast po ang ating webinar via FB Live, so once mag-end na itong ating day 1 session, it will be automatically uploaded sa aming official Facebook page. So doon nyo po pwedeng i-replay kung may mga parts kayong na-miss. So pwede nyo pong i-replay ang ating webinar doon sa aming, by watching sa aming official Facebook page. So yan, maraming salamat po sa lahat, and together, let us connect, harness, innovate, and protect. So see you tomorrow, everyone. Thank you for joining.
What is that? Yeah. Time, Flora. 12:30 man close kita. Attendance. Hindi man. Kondom yung man.
Thank you po.